Thank you, Ted. Thank you, so I can hear.
That's ready.
Okay, hello. Welcome to the June 6th Wolfeboro ZBA.
Oh,
Thank you.
thanks. Nope, that's not it.
Oh, okay.
Is Luke not joining us? Is Luke?
Like to do a roll call of the members tonight. We have Kate McMohan, alternate, Sabette Stroman, alternate, Sarah Silk, member, Suzanne Ryan, vice chair, myself, Audrey Klein, chairman, Tim Ryan, clerk, and
Who?
Tim Cronin. I elevated you to, I don't know.
Senator?
And Chuck Sumner, alternate.
Congressperson?
We do not have Luke Friedenberg here tonight. Is that correct, town planner?
My understanding, yes.
So for the evening, because these cases are related, I'm going to seat one alternate for the entire evening, and Kate McMohan will sit as alternate, sit as a member tonight for Luke. Okay. Would you like to read? Well, we're going to, I guess, take a look at the agenda and make some adjustments. So,
Yes, if we could procedurally deal with the last case, which is, I believe, your case number 11, which is the density issue. That's sort of the threshold question for the manufactured housing park. And if we could do that first, then we'll see how the others go.
Which one first?
The density question.
Item D.
Case number 11, I believe it is.
11V22.
do you have a preference for the order of the others?
Not particularly.
Why don't we choose an order now? I guess I would like to hear number 7, number 8, and then number 5.
Sounds like a plan.
The problem that I have with that one is putting
which
it
one?
first.
Which one? The density one?
Yeah.
What problem do you have with
The
that?
problem I have with that is would be reflective of this plan we got, this
Yes.
document that we got Friday, I think. I haven't had a chance to only scan it. I don't think it's fair to the board to try and take that up now.
So we could hear what they have to say about it, and then if we wish to continue it based on more information or trying to understand what we have, then we can do that.
Okay.
But I think it makes sense to hear the discussion on that first.
Okay, so then, would you tell me the order again? So,
Yes. 22
it's going to be
first.
1,
Yep.
yeah.
Number 7 will be 2.
6 is going to be number 2, which it is currently.
Number 8 will be number 3.
Number 8, which it is currently.
And number 5 is number 4.
And number 5,
Ready?
Yes.
4. And
Well,
what
let's see.
happened to case 6B22?
We heard that last time, so that's not on the agenda.
I just looked
No,
at the minutes.
not according to the minutes, we
Nothing.
didn't hear it.
It's not in the minutes.
You voted that it did not meet the threshold for a variance, and it was removed from the agenda.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
we have talked to a town attorney before, and I know you were there because we were in the office downstairs. And if you get an application sent in, you either approve it, you disapprove it, or you ask them to withdraw it. You cannot ignore it.
That's not ignoring it. We dismissed it, and yes, that was advice given, but we weren't talking about the
Show
situation.
me where it is in here, Audrey. I don't see it, and I just looked at it again today,
Show you what?
where we took a vote on the minutes, please. I don't see.
I can show you the video.
Well, what about the minutes?
The minutes have been or will be corrected.
Well,
Yes,
we dispensed with 10V22. We dispensed with
You
that.
voted on 9 and 10 and approved the variances.
And
But the
9
other one was
9V22.
removed.
And we didn't vote to take the other one off the agenda. We voted to move it to the end of the.
Nope, that was number 5. That was
was
number
five.
5. We voted to move to the end of the agenda, and number 6, we voted to dismiss because it met the terms of the ordinance, and you can't have a variance hearing on something that meets the terms of the ordinance.
There was a vote to move 5V22, and it failed.
Right, it moved to the end of the agenda.
Yeah.
There was a vote to remove it, but instead that failed, and it got moved to the end instead.
Yeah, so where is it?
It's that we're doing it at the end.
It's letter A on tonight's agenda.
That's the 4th one we're going to do.
But where is 6V22? We didn't
That's-
vote on that.
Yes, we did vote on it.
Yes, you did.
What did we vote to do with it?
We voted
That
to
it didn't meet-
dismiss it because we can't hear a variance application on something that meets the ordinance.
But it was my understanding from town attorney that you just can't.
Well, I think during
Make
that
it go
discussion, it wasn't brought up, this issue of whether something can be heard because it does or doesn't need a variance was not part of that discussion. That was discussing the 3 normal situations. But if you read some of the language in the handbook, as well as some of the case law, one of the first things you do when you look at a variance is determine whether the case actually needs a variance. So basically, every variance application has an administrative appeal process in the beginning to see whether it actually needs to be heard.
So if you were having a de facto administrative appeal of it to determine whether it needs to be heard or not, then why are we no longer following her admonition to vote yea, vote nay, or get them to withdraw it?
Because there was no
Because an administrative appeal,
application.
you have to make a decision on.
Yeah, there was no application for an administrative appeal, so that we were voting on
But there
the
was an
denial that
application
was
for a
turned in
variance.
for the variance.
And it's just out there. Where is the notice of decision for 06V22? We have none.
We don't have a notice of decision because it was
No
dismissed.
decision was made.
It was dismissed. There was
the
no
board-
case to
This
be
is one of the
heard.
questions I had for town attorney that we did not
Okay,
get
well,
a
we can
chance to
still ask
her.
that question.
Well, we did get you said there was no application for it? There was an application.
Not for
it.
an administrative appeal. There was an application for a variance from a section that situation already met the terms of the ordinance. So there was no way to give it a variance.
Could I weigh in on that?
Let me think about that.
I don't know. I've said from the beginning, as far as this whole case goes, we should have sat with counsel and gone over some of these questions that we've had and that we will continue to have tonight, and probably till we take our last breath.
No doubt. So with regard to case 6, we can certainly still ask the attorney about that situation. But tonight, we're hearing these 4.
I don't know when it's appropriate to bring this up. We're going to do the density one first, right?
Yes. Is this an administrative discussion, or should we open the hearing?
Okay, open it, and then I would like to take up that old file over there and talk about it after Attorney Walker does his presentation.
Clerk, would you like to read the case?
Tonight's case, Jordy Hutchinson, Michelle Hanson, Richard Quimby Jr., Revocable Living Trust off Pine Hill Road, Tax map is number 161-15 and 16, case number 11-V-22, public hearing for a variance under Article 24, Section 175-152B of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to allow for a variance for permitted density. This was continued from May 2nd, 2022. Mr. Walker?
Thank you. My name's Randy Walker. I work for Walker & Varney here in Wolfeboro. I won't repeat everything we said at the last hearing. We'll just incorporate it by reference. It is in the minutes or on the video. We're also here with Jordy Hutchinson, who's one of the applicants, and Michelle Hanson, as well as a surveyor, Chris Berry. And what we'd like to do, if we could, is make a global just introduction. If Michelle would like to say just a few things globally, if she could. Chris would like to specifically address the density calculations, and then I'd like to get in after those two and go through the criteria as to why I believe we meet the criteria, if we could do that procedurally.
That sounds fine. I think for the benefit of the people watching or in the audience, this case, there's 3 different areas of the zoning that impact this particular case. So it's complex. It's in the residential zone, it's in the manufactured housing overlay zone, and it is required to have a conservation subdivision. So we'll be talking about those 3 issues as they relate to each other.
All right, so Michelle will start us off then.
Thank you.
Okay. My name is Michelle Hanson. I am one of the developers. I just wanted to speak for a minute about why we're doing this and to talk a few minutes about points that Audrey brought up last meeting about manufactured housing, in particular, quality construction, price appreciation, and resident-owned communities. So it's no secret, everybody knows, that local housing market has drastically changed. As longtime locals and longtime realtors, we've seen this firsthand. We've seen our peers being forced to move out of town due to being priced out of the housing market, even when they're desperate to stay in to keep their kids in the school. We've seen our fellow business owners struggle as they can't find the staff they need. And we've seen house after house being sold to out-of-towners to be used part-time or rent them on Airbnb.
Excuse me, Michelle?
Yes.
There are people that are going to watch this on TV. Could you just slow down?
Oh, sure. I am a
I
fast
know
talker.
maybe you're a little nervous, but it's fine. We don't want to miss anything.
Okay.
Thank you.
We've seen
Thank
our
you,
school
Sarah.
enrollment shrink. Governor Wentworth poured $43 million into the Kingswood campus in 2013. Since that time, the middle school enrollment has dropped 13%, and the high school has dropped 11%. When we started thinking about what would be the highest and best use of this property, manufacturing housing was our first thought. We knew we wanted to provide what was missing, which is quality housing that is within reach of our local families. And going the easy route and doing just a couple of lots with a usual 2,000 square foot house wasn't going to provide that. When we started looking closer at manufactured housing, the more we looked, the more impressed we were. We spoke with other community owners, and we talked to multiple dealers, educating ourselves on the production and the quality of these homes. We visited dealers and walked through model homes, seeing and feeling the quality firsthand. I hope you were able to watch the video we sent a link to on Friday, which was the factory tour of the manufacturer we hope to use. It's quite impressive. If anybody has not seen it, it can be found on our wolfeborohousing.com website. Manufactured housing is built to HUD code. It was established in 1976, revamped in 2000, and they constantly do updates. It sets strict standards for manufacturers. With a HUD code seal of approval, which every home has to get, manufactured homes automatically meet regional standards for roof load, wind resistance, thermal efficiency, safety, and durability. Moreover, Champion Homes, the manufacturer we plan on using, offers a 7-year warranty that covers the structure, all systems, electrical, plumbing, heating, cooling, hot water, and all appliances. No other new construction or even a car is going to offer that. We toured multiple parks, noting what we did or did not like. Ledgewood, a 55-plus housing community in Manchester, stood out. set on a lot with similar topography. It was welcoming and neighborly, and there was obvious pride of ownership. The pictures you're seeing on the TV are from Ledgewood this morning. We are planning a similar neighborhood. Quality homes with extensive landscaping and underground utilities, a walkable neighborhood with community gardens and dog park. Plowing, shoveling, and curbside trash pickup will be included, and all of this for significantly less than anything else in the market today. As of this morning, I did give you a list of what's on the MLS today. The cheapest thing on the market is $420,000. And even excluding listings over $1 million, the median is almost $600,000. Per the 2020 census, the median family household and median married couple family household in Wolfeboro earn $80,000 and $93,000 respectively. They could not buy anything today. They would be able to buy in this community. Manufactured housing does appreciate in value just like stick-built homes. We included samples of property appreciation in your packet on Friday, and you have them again today. And LendingTree published a study in 2021 that found nationwide, and even more so in New Hampshire, manufactured housing increased in value more than stick-built homes in the 5-year period from 2014 to 2019. I also just handed out a graph that shows from Federal Housing Finance Authority that the home price index for manufactured housing historically follows the same path as stick-built homes. So down the road, it is very possible this community will become a resident-owned community like the Birches here in town. Per law, when a developer sells a property, the residents have the first right of refusal to buy it themselves. Rock USA is a New Hampshire-based nonprofit that helps these communities who have voted to purchase the park in doing so. Not every park does. Ledgewood, for example, this one here, was given the opportunity in 2016, and the residents voted not to. A goal in Wolfeboro's 2000 master plan is create opportunities to allow development of a more diverse housing stock, which includes home ownership and rentals for people of all ages and all income levels. This project will provide home ownership to households that are currently priced out of the market. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure at what point to bring this up, but, and under what provision of these appeals. But Tavis, can I have that old file? I think it's a red one. And I think I'd probably want to be, thank you, I think I'd probably want to be addressing Attorney Walker. From the beginning, we didn't have a history on this proposal as far as the lay of the land. We don't have a survey. We have an old plan that we were given that was drawn in Vermont by an engineer. We had we have a colorful drawing here with some drawings as to what's going to be placed on the plots. But I tried to look up the history of how these two backlots, the one backlot and then the one that has the easement for the apartments, how they were developed. And usually we get a presentation either from the planner or the applicant telling us the history, and that's what I think we need, because when I look through these plans, I can't get there from here. I had to ask for the deeds. You never even gave the board the deeds. So I've tried to go through the deeds and place the deeds with the lots to figure out how it all matches up. And as far as I got was this plan with the front lots, this older plan with the front lots back in, I don't know what year it was. I can't make it out, but it's an old plan. And there was some question about this Lot 8. And Lot 8 had some serious septic disposal questions. In fact, it was said that they couldn't meet the septic disposal. I can't find Lot 8. So I think it behooves the applicant, it's your responsibility to prove to us and show to us the history and how you propose to move forward. And I don't think we've gotten that germane to what the proposal is.
May I address that, ma'am?
Sure.
So we're here tonight to talk about,
I'm sorry.
My name is Christopher Berry. I'm president of Berry Surveying and Engineering, project design engineer, and a representative for the applicant also. So we're here tonight to talk about the mobile home park side of the project. The plan that you just pulled out and
I'm having a hard time hearing him.
Could you pull the microphone a little closer?
It's not
Sure.
you, it's kind of like muffled or something. I don't know if it's, they can control it up there and turn it up, or what's going on.
I would just try standing a little closer to the mic
I know,
and
it's
see if that
echoey.
helps.
We don't,
Yes.
It's always hard here.
It's not just me.
Speak in a higher pitch.
That might help.
I won't be changing the tone of my voice tonight, no. No. So the plan, we're here tonight to discuss the mobile home park side of the project. The plan that you just pulled out and displayed on the table is a subdivision from 1989 or thereabouts, and is along the frontage of the prior application that this board approved a variance for. So that subdivision plan that you just pulled out and displayed has nothing to do with the project that we're proposing here tonight. So in terms of the project submission and plan representations that have been given to the board for your review, all of the information that we've provided to you is the best available information that we have at the time, or had at the time that we prepared the concept plans. And those include perimeter boundary surveys done by others that have now been updated, wetlands analysis that had been done by others has now been updated, and a topographic survey of the site, which has now been confirmed by Real Survey Topo. So all of the information that we've provided to you on the concept plan that you have in front of you is accurate for the purposes of tonight's discussion.
Anything that we would ask for, you're going to have to bring to the planning board anyway.
We understand that completely, and we have since surveyed the property, and there's really no change between the survey and the provided plans.
I have a couple of questions about what was submitted, just kind of general graphic questions so that I can understand. There's a heavy dotted line. Is that the 100-foot setback for the conservation subdivision?
That'd be the 50-foot setback, yes.
It's a 50-foot setback for the
Yes,
conservation subdivision?
Yes, because we're under 50 acres.
Okay. And that stops at a certain point. Is that because you don't need to do it all the way around because there's no housing proposed on the other part?
It seemed a little superfluous for the purposes of the plan.
Okay. And I understand we're not talking about the other lot or the dashed red line, but that dashed red line goes all the way up along the border of the properties we're looking at. Is that significant to this anymore, or is that no longer something we're looking at? And what is it?
The dashed red line was a contemplation for a subdivision, so that really isn't germane to tonight's discussion.
Okay.
The heavy blue line between the two parcels, that's a line that would be abandoned, whereas this proposal includes a merger of those two parcels for the development.
I think it's a gray line, but it cuts that. It's 15 and 16.
Understood.
Okay. Oh, it's blue on the other page. So I have some more questions about your report, but let's, I don't want to jump ahead.
No.
I just wanted to ask those general questions about the paper we have.
Yeah, well, so my question still is, what was this original parcel called? Was it Lot 8?
I don't know where your reference to Lot 8 comes from, ma'am.
Well, what, is
If
there,
it-
is
if
there?
Lot
a-
8 comes from
Can
the
Attorney Walker address this, please?
Sure.
I'm sure you've got a better understanding
Chris-
of it.
Chris is absolutely right. Lot 8 has nothing to do with this application at all. there was an original subdivision which you laid out, which is where Winnipesaukee Lumber is, and the others are like 6 lots on either side of Winnipesaukee Lumber that were done 20, 30 years ago. And when that plan was done, there was a reference to this 8th or 7th lot in there that said we're not sure about the septic on that, and we need a little bit more information. That's all since been resolved. That property's been built out 20 or 30 years ago, but it's way over on the other project. It's on the other side of the multifamily project that this board has already approved. It doesn't abut at all or have anything to do with the project tonight, which is the manufactured housing part. It's farther down Pine Hill Road. So if you see that frontage, that plan that you laid out, there was a 60-foot corridor that goes back into the multifamily complex, which is what we discussed last month, which this board has already approved. Lot 8 was around that area, but again, nothing to do even with that project. It doesn't have to do with anything that we are dealing with. It was pre-Winnipesaukee Lumber.
Well, there was a transfer of small amount of land to Winnipesaukee Lumber to protect their buffer area, but I still couldn't find that remaining land. And there was, what concerned me is there, and if I've got the wrong information for the wrong parcel, I need to be straightened out.
When you pulled that out, I did see Lot 8, and I saw that it was talking about the lots up here along the street.
There's no Lot 8 on here.
Would you like to pull that out again?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think it was Lot 8.
I believe you're right. I vaguely remember myself 7 and 8 doing a title maybe 2 or 3 months ago on it. But they were all on the road, and this is all basically land off the road.
Oh, all right. Well, what's this back here, then?
So,
This is the street.
Can I approach? I'd be happy to tell you.
yep, please.
This is the area I'm concerned about.
Exactly. So I believe that this is Winnipesaukee Lumber on this side, and land is our property back here, which was the multifamily part. What you're doing tonight is all over here.
Okay,
So if we go to this plan right here,
yep.
there's the entrance, there's Winnipesaukee Lumber. Winnipesaukee Lumber is right in here, again on the right side of this 60-foot right-of-way. This is what was all approved. We're way over here. We're probably half a mile away from old Lot 8, which is way at the end, which would be over even off of this map. Winnipesaukee Lumber was in here. And then that additional piece that they got was this little bump out, Suzanne, right in there.
Yeah.
That's back in here, which is shown on this plan as having, again, nothing to do with this project. So this is what was approved for multifamily last hearing. Now we're over on this side, a good distance away. So Lot 8 was way over here. Okay.
Thank you.
For now.
Okay.
So, Madam Chair, would you like me to proceed, or do you have questions you'd like to ask?
Are you all set, Suzanne, for now?
For now, yeah.
Okay, yes, please proceed.
Thank you. Whose is this? Is this yours?
So after the last zoning board meeting, it was pretty clear the zoning board charged us with determining what the underlying density was for the project site.
Gotta use that microphone. Can you take it out of and use it in your hand? Would that work easier?
I'd rather not. I'll just step closer. Thank you.
If you could, that would be good.
So we were charged with determining the underlying density of the zone for the subject parcel, for determining what the base unit density is for the project site. In so doing, you really need to read.
Can you articulate what the conservation subdivision requires you to do in order to determine what the density for that section would be?
Yes, I can do that.
Okay.
I'd like to articulate how we get to using the conservation subdivision. Is that acceptable?
Let's hear it. Let's see if that explains it.
Okay, so the manufactured housing ordinance is an overlay in the residential district zone. So that ordinance allows for the use of manufactured housing in the underlying zone. When you then apply the conservation subdivision ordinance, which is required to be used for a project of this site, that ordinance then says that all other ordinances, unless they are more specific than this one, are trumped essentially by the conservation overlay district or the conservation subdivision. In the conservation subdivision, it defines 3 methodologies for determining the underlying net density for the project site. The first is the net tract density calculation. This is done by taking the entire project site, backing out slopes of 15%, backing out very poorly drained soils, and backing out an additional 20% of the remaining land mass, and then dividing by the pure density allowed in the underlying zone. In this case, we're in the R zone. 43,560 square feet are required in the base density for the underlying zone.
And that's an acre, just to make it easy for everybody, right?
Yes, yes, ma'am. The second methodology for determining base zoning is to utilize what's known as a HIS map. We don't really use HIS maps anymore. We use site-specific soils maps. It is still a soils map, and you still derive the same information from it. It goes by a different name for whatever reason. The town of Wolfeboro prescribes a certain amount of land mass required per unit based on the amount of good soil or bad soil that you have on a project site. In this particular case, we have not conducted a HIS map of the project site because we would not undergo that work unless required to by the planning board. We would not be going to the planning board without the benefit of a zoning variance from the zoning board. So what we've done is we've used NRCS soils, or the county soils maps, which is a common planning tool that's utilized. We've found a common soil grouping that's utilized in the town of Wolfeboro, and we determined, based on the site-specific or the NRCS soils maps, how many unit we could get in the underlying zoning. The third is a pure subdivision design, where you design a subdivision on the parcel using the conventional means and methods. One could surmise that you could do a pretty quick calculation to determine that. But at the end of this, the ordinance prescribes that you use the least amount of units in determining your unit density calculation. The net tract unit density calculation by far is the least number of units that would be permitted on this piece of property, and so therefore it's the first in which I've itemized out for discussion in the analysis. Are questions on that, or would you like me to continue?
Can you just wait a minute while I catch up with you? So the net tract calculation, which is the calculation required in the conservation subdivision, one of the 3 methods, allows you 25 units. Okay?
Continue?
Yep, please.
So the remainder of the analysis is a view of the different means and methods used in the zoning to derive densities on pieces of property. It also points out sort of inequities that are used in the net tract density calculation. And this is not in an effort to say that our unit count should be any more than 25 in the net tract density. That's not the point of the analysis. The point of the analysis is to show the board the inequities that exist in the ordinance between the multiple ways of determining density that are not in the favor of an applicant, are also not in the favor of using the open space or conservation subdivision. And I'll point out a few of them. So the first is, when you take the total acreage of a parcel, the first subtraction you make is very poorly drained soils. We have no very poorly drained soils on our site, so we don't have to remove those soils from our project site. But very poorly drained. So there are two types of wetlands. There's a poorly drained wetland, which is very common, and then there is a very poorly drained wetland, which typically has standing water in it or soils in it that you would lose a boot in, is how I describe it to most people. The second subtraction that you then make is to take out all slopes of 15%. That is inequitable in this ordinance because 15% slopes are buildable in the town of Wolfeboro in a conventional subdivision. Slopes all the way up to 25% are buildable and can be used in a standard subdivision design on any given project. And so to ask an applicant to remove 15% slopes from a conservation subdivision automatically puts the applicant at a disadvantage from a standard subdivision design. The second type of divisible is the underlying zoning. The underlying zoning actually allows for 2 units for 65,000 square feet, not just 1 unit per 43,560 square feet. And therefore, the divisible in deriving the number of units in a conventional subdivision, again, is inequitable and flawed when using the net tract acreage design. The 20%. So the applicant is then required to take the remaining balance of the landmass and divide by 20%. That number is supposed to arrive or project the amount of landmass that would be used for roadways or easements or other areas in a subdivision. 20% is a large number of the remaining landmass of nearly 50 acres of land. It does not nearly come close to the amount of area that would be used for either a standard subdivision roadway or a conservation subdivision roadway. That's nearly, in this case, it's nearly 9 acres of land. And so it's been our experience in the past that 10% has been used, or a pure calculation of the amount of land mass that's used in the roadways in a conservation subdivision actually be calculated for. But that revision or removal of that land mass from the calculation is another large area that would not otherwise be removed from a standard subdivision.
Madam Chair, may I ask a town planner a quick question relative to this?
Sure.
Tavis, the ordinance here that we have for our conservation, does not all conservation subdivisions have to follow the same parameters?
No, all subdivisions do not have to follow
No,
those.
conservation.
The first question when somebody wants to subdivide land is, does the conservation subdivision ordinance apply?
And if it does apply, do they not all have to follow the same set of instructions here for deducting 15% slopes?
Unless they are exempt from it, yes.
Okay, so this is inherently no worse or nor no better, regardless of who the applicant
I think
is.
the point that's being made is it's inconsistent with the subdivision regulations. The conservation subdivision regulations themselves are quite.
Are you
But they
almost
do
done going
exist.
through your comparison of the various ways of coming up with?
For the conservation subdivision, yes, there's
Okay.
another
I'm
section.
sorry.
So
I
I'd
wasn't-
like to have some discussion about that if he's
Okay, I hadn't finished
along
asking
your lines.
Travis the
Yep.
question. If you want to interrupt, let me know later when I can finish my
I
questions.
want to make sure he's done so that we can have a conversation about what you brought
Okay.
up, because I think it's really relevant.
I'm done in terms of conservation subdivision calculation, yes.
So what I hear you saying, Sarah, and I think I might have had the same thought, is the whole point of the conservation subdivision is it's more restrictive than the rest of the zoning. That was the intent, right?
My point is that the conservation subdivision net track calculations are fair to anyone that wants to use that. And because they use 10% instead of 20% reduction for roads in some other community is not really relative to the town of Wolfeboro.
Right, because they wrote the conservation subdivision with these benchmarks in it.
Correct.
Yeah. And not wants to use them, but is required to use them, actually. Well, they do apply to everybody. Well, they apply to everybody who,
Correct.
yeah.
I thought conservation subdivision is if your lot size is a certain size,
Right, there's some,
then you have to use
Yes.
it. If it wasn't,
Right.
then you don't have to use it.
the exemptions are fairly limited. It's,
Tavis, do you have that? Can you read that to us, please?
I can, yes. I would encourage the board to look at the objectives of the conservation subdivision, which,
we will get there.
no, I know.
Okay.
Under exempt subdivisions, a subdivision shall be exempt from the conservation subdivision requirement if the Director of Planning and Development determines that the proposal meets one of the criteria set forth below. If the Director determines that a subdivision is exempt, the Director shall provide written notice to the applicant, all abutters, the Chair of the Planning Board, and the Chair of the Conservation Commission within 5 business days after making the determination. Should I just go to the criteria?
Yeah.
Okay. Director of Planning and Development shall find that a proposed subdivision is exempt
Could you
from the...
slow down a little? Thank you.
The
give us
Director of
the
Planning and
number so we can
Development
follow
shall
along?
find that a proposed subdivision is exempt from the requirement that a subdivision be developed as a conservation subdivision only if the proposed subdivision meets one of the following criteria.
Yes, can you just wait a minute? This is section,
175, 148, B,
right.
B1. The subdivision will consist of 3 or fewer lots. I'm just going to read the beginning. 2, the subdivision will consist of lots, all of which will have a minimum lot area of 400,000 square feet.
Which is about 10 acres?
A little under, yes.
Okay. So
the-
only 3, about 10 acres each.
And the criterion that there be no potential for future subdivision. 3, the subdivision will consist of 3 or fewer lots, accommodating a total of not more than 3 dwelling units. There is additional land that may be developable in the future for which a conceptual long-range development plan meeting the requirements of this chapter will be prepared, and no additional lots will be created in the future. Or 4, the subdivision will create not more than 1 additional lot accommodating 1 dwelling unit, and no other lots have been created from the parcel within the preceding 7-year period. Or 5, the proposed conventional subdivision creates a total number of lots that are less than 50% of the permitted development density, is fully compliant with all underlying zoning requirements, and the owner imposes a restriction prohibiting any additional subdivision of the created parcels.
So in my view, the exceptions are pretty limited. And everything else is required to have the conservation subdivision applied to it. Unless they're, requesting a variance, which then I would say, I think what Sarah was saying, which is, and I'm sure we'll get to this, why does this particular tract of land not need to comply because there's something unique about it? So the argument that regular density is figured in different ways, I don't think that's an inequity. I think the whole purpose of the conservation subdivision is to make it more stringent. I don't see that as an inequity.
We certainly didn't get that from the purpose statement of the ordinance, though. It seems to me that the purpose of this ordinance is to, and general ordinances of this type, are to take densities that you would ordinarily get on a piece of property and then confine them to certain areas, which this clearly says to do. It doesn't necessarily say to make it more restrictive to develop your land. In fact, it doesn't say that once in your ordinance.
It doesn't say it, but does not the calculations create that?
It does, and that's why, in our opinion, that's inequity.
Okay.
I'm not even sure if B and C would ever be applicable as options, because the way you're required to calculate the net development density is always going to be more restrictive, because it's the only one that removes 20% for roadways.
Right, and I honestly think that was the way it was intended, but.
Oh, may well be.
So as you get to the, uniqueness of why this property, I guess the purpose statement will make more of an impact on the conversation, in my view. But I don't know if we're there yet, because we're going through your report, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Anybody else have anything else to say about the calculation method? Sarah, did you want to add anything to that?
Sabat's question there, I was just trying to point out that what we have here in this conservation subdivision is a level playing field for everyone that wants to use it. And just because some other towns that this particular surveying outfit is familiar with uses a 10% and whatever, is really not germane.
Right.
He has to work within the regulations within our community, not to bring other communities' interpretations onto what was voted on by our taxpayers and our voters and with intent. And so does that help you understand what your question was?
Part of that calculation, Madam Chair, is 20% of this total project is nearly 9 acres. It'd be hard to conceive of a standard subdivision that would ordinarily have roadways of any subdivision size that would be of 9 acres in size. And that's what that 20%, 10%, whatever the percentage is, that's what that is trying to account for. How much of a roadway reduction would there be in a standard subdivision?
Well, if it was 1 unit per acre, the roadway would be a much larger square footage than if it's clustered. So I don't know what that number is, because I don't deal with this stuff, but the more spread out it is, the more roadway you're going to have, clearly.
Right. But understanding that 9 acres, 50 feet wide for a roadway infrastructure is miles of road.
Another
many?
point.
I'd have, not that good.
Yes.
Another
Chuck?
point is that the Conservation Commission would like us to pave less
Could
of
you
this
speak
property.
up? Say that again? I
The
didn't hear.
Conservation Commission would like us to pave less than, a minimum amount of that property to allow for proper drainage. So actually,
Can you explain that again, because I didn't understand you?
if we use 20% for roadways, that's a big number. And it's a number that means that's not permeable land anymore. And the Conservation Commission's point, one of their points was that they would like to see more permeable property left after development.
Right,
And-
which is the purpose of clustering things.
Right, so using the 10% is what they say is realistically required, and it more than, it satisfies one of the concerns of the Conservation Commission.
The ordinance seems to encourage an innovative design with less roadways, but regardless of whether you build 20% or you build 10%, you're required to negate 20% for density.
That's what it says. Yep.
Correct.
Exactly. Yeah, I get it. That's what it says, and it seems to be in excess of what would actually happen. Nevertheless, that's the language in the ordinance.
And again, I just want to point out, most of this analysis is not us standing here saying we deserve more units based on the net tract density calculation. We fully agree that if you use the net tract density calculation in its purest form, that we would be entitled to 25 units. But that's the reason we're here for variance. And we're just
Exactly.
simply here pointing out that if you look at your ordinance in different ways and in different lights, that there are varying, other than the net tract density calculation, there are varying ways of deriving density on this very same parcel.
So having said that, even the 3 ways that you did it don't come close to the 90 units that you're requesting. So there'll be more information about where we get to the 36 units, which was your highest amount calculated by the most favorable language you could find, and the 90 units that you're asking for.
So the 36 units, let's see. Well, the 36 was was utilizing the 25% slopes as a reduction, and then using a more favorable 10% reduction in the infrastructure. And so again, that's not the way it would be calculated, but that is what we would consider, if you look at all of your regulations as a whole, where you allow for development on slopes of 15 to 25%, utilizing the 25% slopes or removing the 25% slopes and dividing by 65,000 square feet per unit, that's how the 36 units would be derived. Again, that's not how the unit density calculation is spelled out.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, certainly. Could you pull your microphone closer?
Yeah, sure. Is that okay now?
As long as you lean forward, probably, yes.
Stay with it. I understand that the philosophy of the conservation subdivision is to maximize open space and also to concentrate infrastructure and utilities and systems. I guess my question is, and this might not be the right place to ask it, is what is the site size for each manufactured home, the lot?
Oh, we're proposing 50 by 100 sites.
50 by 100?
Yes.
I have a question. On the television screen, there are some rotating photos of another location here in Wolfeboro.
Mm-hmm.
Those are not within 50 feet of each other. Those look like much larger lots than what you're talking to us about.
I'd have to have Jordy or Michelle discuss this.
Could you identify where these pictures were taken? I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Those pictures are taken at Ledgewood in Manchester, and I believe their minimum lots.
Can you just tell us who you are?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Jordy Hutchinson, and I am one of the developers and applicants. And those pictures are taken at Ledgewood Community in Manchester. I do not know the exact site size. We'll have to get back to you on that. But they have a higher density. They're a 40-acre site with 140 units.
So it appears if the site looks about comparable.
It's a similar site in terms of the topography, more units.
Spread out further.
Slightly more spread out. But our minimum site would be 50 by 100. Some of the sites will be larger. And that's also something that we'll work with the planning board on. We're not dead set on that. So,
didn't I see a number somewhere where it was like 4 houses on 1 acre? It was being divided, or did I dream that?
Well, I kind of thumbnailed it at 50 by 100. It's something like eight units to an acre, approximately.
8 units to an acre.
Yes.
Does that make sense? And what's drawn right here?
Because that's clearly not what we're looking at there, right?
Well, I think Jordy pretty much said that's true. We're not looking at that there. So I'd like to continue asking questions about what we see on the paper for the site layout. Is everybody okay with going down that road right now?
Were you doing the calculation a minute ago?
So it would just be the remainder of the analysis, which takes varying pieces of the ordinance and applies a density to this parcel based on that calculation for that unit type in the ordinance. And the only reason that is part of the discussion is when you look at unit density on a piece of property to determine what's appropriate or not appropriate, we often look at determining what other uses could be permitted on that site or surrounding sites, and then apply that methodology to that parcel to see whether or not it's an appropriate use or not. And then the last is whether or not by NHDES standards, subsurface standards, lot loading standards, whether or not this project would be appropriate for this site also. And so there's that portion of the analysis also where between 126 and 190 units would be permitted just based on the soil types that are on site. So it's a pure analysis of the relationship between the number of units being asked, 90, versus utilizing different methodologies to determine what is the most appropriate number in use on this site.
And if you look at the square footage in an acre, this comes out just shy of 9 units.
Right, 871.
What were you saying, 9 units per acre is about?
Yeah.
Right, it's a little bit, right.
It's 44,000.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I have a question. This is on page 3 in the calculations. It talks about soil loading capacity for multifamily residential use, 2-bedroom units with municipal water.
Sorry, I was on the right page to start with. Did you
There's
please say that? Where are you again?
1, 2, 3, 4 black dots.
Yep.
Okay,
Lastly,
look at number 3.
3.
It says, when considering soil loading capacity, the multifamily residential use would be applied to this project, whereas they are grouping of homes on one lot. The project proposes 2-bedroom units with municipal water. I don't see anything in here from DES about sewer, septic, and loading, and they're supposed to take care of it on site.
That's what that whole section discusses, ma'am. So that's the loading factor that's utilized for group 4 soil group, which is the most conservative soil group that we have on site.
So you're saying that multifamily loading is more restrictive than single-family loading?
No, we're saying that the town's loading factor, take the 52,000 square feet for the soil grouping, you multiply that by 0.65.
You're going to have to use more layman's terms in what you're saying, because I don't understand what you're going for.
So the multifamily loading calculation in the zoning ordinance asks you to take your underlying soil group, find it on a chart, and we've sort of chosen the soil loading factor of 52,000. The calculation is then to take 0.65% of that, or 65% of that, and then a 20% reduction for on-site water. Your zoning would allow for 79 units.
What
if,
is the...
if that soil is consistent through the whole site.
What is the percentage used for single-family rather than multifamily?
So single family, well, it doesn't work in that equation because that equation is strictly for multifamily.
Did you do the calculation for single-family?
That calculation is in the HIS mapping in the prior section.
But I thought you weren't using HIS mapping, you were the Natural Resource Conservation Service.
We use the same soil group across the analysis.
So use the same soil grouping, but a different multiplier.
Yes, because the zoning ordinance prescribes a different multiplier.
Our zoning ordinance or
Yes.
the state BES septic regulations?
Bullet point 3 utilizes state soils and the calculation that's provided in the multifamily zoning in the zoning ordinance. Bullet 4 discusses what DES would permit on the site.
But bullet 2 says that it's Woodstock Bryce, and Woodstock is a lower quality soil than Bryce. So are we using calculations for Bryce or for Woodstock?
Woodstock.
Okay.
So we chose the most conservative group of soil for the entire site, the most conservative slope zone for the entire site, and then applied these calculations to them.
I just have a quick question. When they're figuring it, do they figure it solely on bedroom units regardless of whether it's single or multifamily? Is that how they do it, is by bedrooms?
It's by bedrooms. Each bedroom is 150 gallons per day.
Okay, so it doesn't matter whether it's multifamily or single-family if you're just counting the bedrooms?
From DES's
Point of view.
standpoint and point of view, it doesn't make a difference.
Okay. That's
So
what I thought.
they don't figure a kitchen with one bedroom is a different number than a kitchen with a 4-bedroom house?
Well, there's no such thing as a one-bedroom house. So it's,
Okay,
so it's
2-bedroom.
automatically, it's a 2-bedroom, which is a 300 gallons per day. A 1-bedroom apartment is 225 gallons per day. So every unit is automatically based at a 2-bedroom count.
I guess that wasn't my question. Isn't there an extra percentage for a unit because it has a kitchen? So a unit with a kitchen and 2 bedrooms would be a different calculation than a unit with a kitchen and 4 bedrooms per?
No, not when calculating loading.
Okay.
If you're thinking of, you and I probably deal with ADUs a lot. And so an accessory dwelling unit. So let's say you have an existing 3-bedroom home that's 450 gallons per day, 150, 150, 150. Somebody wants to put in a 1 or a 2-bedroom ADU on it. Your apartment or ADU generates 225 gallons per day. It's the correlation between kitchens and bedrooms doesn't exist in a standard calculation.
Okay.
Audrey? Although you just explained it, verbally, we have repeatedly heard 2 bedrooms. On all the applications, it says 3 bedrooms. So the record needs to show that they're talking about 3 bedrooms, and that it's on right here.
So my letter is also part of the record, ma'am. And what the applicant has stated is that it would be a mix between 2 and 3 bedrooms. And so whether it's 2 or 3 bedrooms affects the loading on the site.
Well, you're asking for, on your application, 3 bedrooms.
So is this potentially, whether it's 2 or 3 bedrooms, going to be adjusted based on what you get for a sewer loading?
Yes.
Okay. So does that make sense? So they're asking for 3-bedroom, but if they do the sewer calculations and they don't have enough for 90 units with 3 bedrooms, they'll reduce some of them down to 2-bedroom units so they can meet that number.
But we've also provided you the calculation for if we did all 3-bedroom units.
Right.
We've provided that calculation as 126 units would be permitted on site. So I did it both ways for this very conversation.
But in fact, you won't really know until you work with the state on the disposal fields.
That's right.
So when we talk about density, we're talking about building units. Somewhere along the line, it has to equate to human people on the site and the impact that it has to the site, be it trips per day or...
Yeah, that probably would, but the density, just the plain density only talks about units. And so obviously the impact of those units, like you say, would impact traffic, the septic loading, and other factors.
And when we go to the 5 criteria, that will factor into one of the 5 criteria.
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
Perhaps. Haven't gotten there yet. I think I understand your report.
Okay.
Does anybody else have any technical questions? Because I think Mr. Walker or other
Sure.
people will talk to the criteria.
Well, I was also going to simply point out that you were discussing the merits of the plan that we had prepared.
You go back to the microphone again, please.
Yes, ma'am. So the chair was pointing out the merits of the plan that we had prepared and its context with the open space and conservation subdivision ordinance. And there are a number of things that we took from that ordinance and applied to that plan. In fact, we took the conservation subdivision ordinance and applied it to that entire project. So the chair has pointed out that we have a perimeter setback. We have setbacks from the roadways. We have setbacks between units, which is prescribed within the ordinance. We just want to point out that this does cluster the unit development in one particular area of the property, and does so in a way that doesn't just mash all of the units back to back to back to one another, that each one of the units has a certain level of access and open space afforded to it inside the subdivision. So though we are asking for additional units beyond our net tract density, we are still applying the concepts of a conservation subdivision to the project in earnest.
So what I hear you saying, I think, is that this does meet all the other aspects of a conservation subdivision in intent and in fact, except for you're asking for a density increase.
That's correct.
So, I mean, this plan obviously is not an engineered plan, and these lot sizes might change based on what the planning board thinks. You know, maybe everybody needs to have a shed and there's not room, so these lot sizes are going to change. So there's still a lot of potential changes to what the layout is that we see.
Yes, ma'am. And
Having said that, you're restricted by slopes and wetlands.
slopes and wetlands, but there's still, if the board is inclined to allow for the increase in density, that does not take away the creativity and the creative process that still has to take place moving forward with the planning board. And in fact, we may get to a creative process that modifies this layout pretty substantially with the planning board. It may modify it only modestly. Until we start that process with the planning board, we don't know. But we have to have a jump-off point.
So additionally, although you weren't using the slope percentage for a conservation subdivision when you figured the density, in fact, you are going to not build on those slopes that are 15%? Or is that also a variance to the subdivision that you're asking for?
Well, no, because ironically, the open space subdivision requires that you remove the 15% slopes for the net tract density, but doesn't go on to say that you can't build on them. In
Right.
fact, you have a whole slopes ordinance that says that you can build on them if you do it responsibly and if you do it in a way that is consistent with the planning board's purview.
Now I understand what Tavis was trying to say earlier tonight. That was it. Yeah.
I've got, it's somewhere along here, it says, gives us the following opinion, and it says, which have been reviewed by the planning staff with general concurrence provided by staff. So what does general concurrence mean? And what sort of information can you share with us as to how you see the conservation subdivision applies?
I think that the report you have in front of you correctly calculates the net development density at 25 units. I also see that the ordinance in its various forms does not disallow 79 units, but for its own internal conflict within the regulations. I do understand that DES would allow 120, somewhere between 126 and 190 units on the property without causing environmental harm. So there's a unique balance where the conservation subdivision regulations seem to preclude growth and stop. And if that was the spirit and the intent, then to me, the objective and purpose statements in the section need to be reconsidered, because the objective and purpose of the conservation subdivision regulations are, in my opinion, not furthered by the regulations that support it. I generally consent with the idea that you're required to discount areas or remove areas from density calculations in this section, but not so precluded in other sections. Perhaps one of the more glaring is if you look at the opening sentence, and I think this discussion might come up, the opening discussion on density in the regulations says that you're not to calculate the road area in your density calculation. But then in the very subparagraph under that, you have to take out 20%. So the applicant is left a bit wondering, do I subtract the road I'm proposing and 20% or just 20%? Because the net development density does not jive with the regulation above it.
So can you tell me exactly where that is written that you're referring to?
Yes, I can. In 175-152B, the following steps shall determine the maximum.
Hang on a second. My conservation subdivision is 175-146 on. Do I have the right printing?
It starts at 146. You have to go down to 152 to get into density.
All right.
So 175-152B, permitted density, subparagraph 1. The following steps shall determine the maximum density. Areas within road rights-of-way and/or easement shall be excluded from density calculations. Subparagraph A, calculate the net development density. Net development density by itself, as you subtract the sensitive lands, i.e. very poorly drained soils, and slopes greater than 15%, and then you subtract 20% for roadways. What's a bit unclear is if you're also supposed to subtract the 50-foot buffer that's also required by the section. Under B1, do you subtract the proposed roadway as submitted by the applicant, regardless of this project or another? Do you subtract that in addition to the 20%? Is it part of the 20%? The generally consent is, it's very misleading to the applicant what you're supposed to do. I think the base question for the zoning board is, have they justified the 5 variance criteria to go from the 25 units that the ordinance allows to the 90 that are proposed?
Right, and we haven't had that discussion yet.
Correct. But what I say is generally consent with the application is it's very misleading and confusing how this regulation is to be applied. I think that's why the town has seen so very few of these go through, particularly ones that go above 3 or 4 lots without further subdivision, which I will concede may be the very reason the town adopted this regulation.
You know, since its reading is conflicting, again, I think we have a need for council's interpretation and assistance as to these conflicting calculations.
I think if you look on page 2 of the report, on the 4th bullet on the page, the net tract calculation, that is consistent with the guidance that you received from council as to how to apply the regulation. Start with conservation. Your divisor by base unit size is the 1 acre. That's coming from the manufactured housing overlay. That's why the number stays at 25.
That's right, and I agree that that's what council's opinion was.
Audrey, I have a question while you're absorbing some of that. So where did you come up with the 90? What drove the decision to ask for a variance from 25 to 90?
The difference between is the amount of infrastructure costs and upfront costs that it starts to even start a project like this. Getting to a meeting like this, there's a capital cost that goes into a project like this. You also need to create a project that is of enough size to create a community and a neighborhood. It wasn't just chosen based on what can fit. It's chosen based on the development style that the applicants have tried to create here. And in their view of other projects, what's the number that feels like a good living community to move forward in?
Do you know what in Birch Hill the sites are? Like how much space people have in those homes? Because you referenced that a couple times, I think, in your report.
Well, I think we only mentioned Birch Hill and that it's another manufactured housing community in Wolfeboro. What? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm back up. My name is Jordy Hutchinson, and I am one of the developers. Birch Hill has much larger lots. I think that I don't know the exact size, but they're much, much, much larger lots.
How many examples did you find where there were basically 8 houses per acre?
So our lot size, minimum lot size would be 5,000 square feet. That is not our average, probably will not be our average lot size, and there will not be 8 houses on an acre of land. As you see the plan, the houses don't back up to each other. They back up to open space. So it's not
They're
as
right
if there
next
will
to each
be, they're next to each other, and then some of them are wider. Ledgewood that we mentioned, the minimum lot size there is 6,000 square feet, and their largest is just over 8,000 square feet. Our sizes likely will be similar to that. They won't all be 50 by 100. That is the absolute minimum size we're asking or showing on the plan. And again, that's something that the planning board will have to work with us on to lay out. We're simply looking for, your blessing on getting the density that we're asking for.
Did you look at it? I mean, I get that makes get the most amount of houses, you make the most amount of money. Did you look at it in any light with fewer homes?
We looked at it in a bunch of different ways. I mean, we looked at other parks in other parts of New Hampshire and in other states and talked to park owners, and park owners that had, really nice parks recommended a minimum size of 50 by 100. And, that's where we came up with that.
And if they are 50 by 100, that's not 8 per lot or acre. It's
Yes, it
8.7
is.
per acre.
Well, yeah, but they're not
Yeah, and
0.7
again,
of a house.
they're not going to be, it's not as if there's an acre of land and there's
Understand.
7 or 8 houses packed into it. It's,
Well, that's what this shows, though.
Yes.
I mean, that's what this shows, as a minimum, as a smallest lot, that 8 of these take up an acre.
Correct. Yeah, that is
Right.
correct.
So whether they get spread
But you-
out or
you
not
do-
is largely a planning board question.
Correct.
Also, it incurs more cost and impervious surface the more
Sure.
you spread
No,
it out.
there's definitely an equilibrium there between finding the right size and working with the board on that, and also not, ending up with too much impervious surface and roadway.
It's a 49-acre lot with 9 acres of roads and almost 11 acres of housing, which leaves 30 left over.
Yeah.
Not even 9
Well,
acres of road.
it's not 9 acres.
Yeah, I was
of
going to say,
road.
it's
9
much
acres
less. It's like
is what
3
they have to
acres of
take out.
3 acres of
Correct.
road.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking about a 50 by 100 lot, correct?
We're talking, that's what they're showing
Well,
here.
no, that's
Yeah.
yes, that's what they're talking about. What's the size of the building that's on there? Yeah, 50 sounds like a lot, but,
Oh, it doesn't sound like a lot to me, but.
well, I mean, no, I know what
neither.
you're saying, and they said they wouldn't be backed up to each other, but everything that's internal in the middle of this teardrop shape, up at the top, there were a lot of units that obviously are back to back. But I just
He can
wanted-
answer that, but I'm assuming it depends on how many bedrooms the unit has, as to how large
Yeah,
it
the
is.
average house size is going to be about 26 by 54. That could go up or down, but that's the average
Is that
for what
2
we're
or
looking
3
at.
bedroom, Jordy?
They're available in both 2 and 3 bedroom in that size.
Okay, you haven't
just-
answered
they're
my
different
question.
layouts.
Okay. How big is the 2 bedroom? How big is the 3 bedroom?
I
They're
believe that they make the same. Oh, Michelle, we'll just let Michelle answer that.
And can you introduce yourself also, please?
The standard layouts, if it's a 3-bedroom, all 3 rooms are used as a bedroom. If it's a 2-bedroom, they just take a closet out and make it a den. And that's all it is. They're the same size, same dimensions. They just take a closet out and make it a den or office. That makes a 2-bedroom.
So they're 26 by 54 regardless of the number
Regardless.
of bedrooms? then?
Correct.
Thank you for that clarification.
So, Michelle, I have another question for you, because, and I don't know if this is the right time to bring it up, because I have a lot of questions about not the manufactured housing, because I'm totally on board with that and the construction and all of that. It's the question about the housing sitting on land that is not owned by the person who owns the lot. So I won't go into a lot of that right now, but I'm a little unclear, and I might have just really missed this.
That is what makes it affordable. The land is expensive. building it out is expensive, roads are expensive. If we had to sell the land with the building, they would be the same price as everything else on the market these days.
Michelle?
Yes.
I disagree. I've done a lot of research.
And
There
we
are a
have
lot-
run our numbers as well.
There are a lot of issues right now in this country regarding trailer parks, the traditional trailer parks, being bought up by investment groups. I believe I looked at the number, like 43% of them in the last year went to investment groups.
That
now,
is
I
correct.
appreciate very much that you brought up the ROC, ROC, and that New Hampshire actually does a very good job with requiring a park owner to first turn it over to the people.
I think it's actually nationwide.
Yeah.
I think every
well, not
resident-
every
yeah.
state. No, not every state
You don't think
requires
so?
that. They're
Okay,
trying
anyway,
to
New Hampshire
enact
does.
it. But New Hampshire does, and
Yes.
that's important. And I think that's great. But unfortunately, it's not as easy as you make it sound, because in many cases, people that have bought that home, that are living in that lot, what they've gone through is perhaps that what they're going to see is a price increase when someone comes in and swoops it up and buys it. And so when they fight it, they have to then buy property that may now be worth millions of dollars. And these folks that bought their $100,000, $150,000 manufactured house cannot afford to buy that property. So even with the law in place, it is not always feasible. In fact, it is rarely feasible for park residents to come in. If there were a way you could put this together and immediately create a co-op like Birch Hill, I mean, I think that would be awesome. But I have a concern about that. But another question I had, though, is I'm not clear about the owner-applicant thing. Are you and Jordy going to buy this property?
Yes, we will be the owners.
Okay, so you're
Yes.
buying it from the Quimbys if all
Correct.
this goes through.
And we
Okay,
have
I
no
didn't know
plans.
if you were
We have no
partners.
plans on selling this. Just so
I'm
you know,
sorry.
we plan on owning this and running this. We have no plans of selling it to any corporate investor.
Well, I know no one ever does have that plan,
course.
but sometimes it's hard.
Of course.
And I'm just looking at the interest down the road, strategically the interest for the people who invest in this home thinking it's their safe haven. And then, you know, every year they see increases and they can deal with the 2%, 3%. But then down the road, you say you want to sell, and the corporate guy's going to come in and say it goes up to 60% in some cases.
Okay, so I'm going to step in. My name's Jordy Hutchinson. I'm one of the developers. Touching on the issue of residents being able to purchase communities, it is actually in New Hampshire pretty common when parks do sell. It's more common than not for them to be bought by the park owners or the park residents.
Does ROC help fund that? I'm not.
ROC is a nonprofit that helps make it happen. Yeah,
Okay.
they help organize the financing. They help make it so that the residents can act quickly enough to meet the statutory obligations.
Okay. I didn't know about them.
So that's
good.
that. And regarding the price increases, when the parks themselves are legislated by the state of New Hampshire, I believe under the Department of Justice, and they regulate, there are dictated limitations to how much park rents can increase annually. So I think there are, some protections to that matter. But that's all, addressed by the state's Manufactured Housing Board.
So
And I
are you
think that's
saying-
under the Department of Justice.
So you're saying it's sort of like rent control that,
I don't think there's rent control, but there are some some protections.
Are you planning on owning?
Get you that.
Are you planning on owning some of the units and renting them out?
That is not our plan, though. We plan to sell all the units.
You've commented on how inexpensive it is to go in and buy one of these units, but they don't.
Well-
but they don't own the land.
We haven't said that.
So who pays for road upkeep and all the maintenance and everything? What are the
So we'll be, as the developers, we will own the park. We will own the land underneath it. We will own the infrastructure. The people who own the homes will pay a monthly park rent. That rent that we collect pays for those.
You will
that
not
upkeep.
own what? I'm sorry, you
Hang
trailed
on,
off.
Let him finish.
We will own the land, the roads, the infrastructure. The tenants or the residents, will own their homes. They rent their site. And it's the same at Birch Hill, although they are common owners, but they pay lot rent. And the lot rent pays for the upkeep of the community.
It's like an HOA fee. Imagine a condo with an
It's
HOA.
common-
It's similar, but it's not. Yes, it's similar. Yeah.
Have you estimated
Condo
what
fee.
those, have you estimated what those fees will be?
Not yes and no. I mean, it all depends on how long this process takes, cost of construction.
How
I mean,
many
the
dwelling
planning
units
board,
there
the
are.
planning board's input is going to have a lot to do with it. If we get 90 units, it's one price. If we get
Well, I was looking
25
at
units,
fees.
it's obviously another.
I was looking at fees, and they were ranging anywhere currently, and I wasn't looking at the quality of the park, but anywhere from 3 to 5 to 600. The issue becomes not so much what you put in place, but the day you decide to sell. And if somebody else purchases the land, and the residents cannot buy it back through ROC and form a co-op, the new owner can come in with any increase, and they can also reduce services. So that wonderful dog park, they can say, well, we need to close that because there's too many diseases coming from the dog park. They can decide that they want to no longer offer free trash pickup and snow removal. So they can, so the problem is, and I love the idea of creating
And I would say-
something like this with a safety net in some way for people for the day that you decide you no longer want to own this property.
And well, I would just point out that
Which may not be
removing
relevant
services.
to what we're deciding today, I know, but that's my thing.
I would just comment that removing services like that would obviously diminish the value of the park. So I think it would be unusual.
But it happens, Jordy. When you're
It doesn't
talking
happen.
about,
It's not
when
common
you're
in New
talking
Ham-
about
in New Hampshire,
corporate
it's not common.
investors, when you're
I
talking,
understand. I've read the same articles that you have. I really have. And it happens all over America. I know.
Yeah.
New Hampshire has led the way on, protecting the residents of manufactured housing communities.
that's good.
So,
Okay.
And it has good track
Can we do
record.
one at a time? Yep.
Yeah, the comparison that you did within the state of New Hampshire and all around, did you compare apples to apples as to leased rented land or associations? Because you've talked about both here in your presentation.
well, what do you mean? We haven't talked about both. We've only explored land lease developments.
No, I mean, when the presentation was made, they compared it to,
Birch Hill. Or they used to.
But that is a co-op, though. It's the same
yeah,
thing.
and this isn't going to be anything like this. It's going to be rented land, correct?
But that's exactly what Birch Hill started as. You would never have Birch Hill if you didn't have a developer like us build Birch Hill.
Right, unless you could get a developer that could do this under the workforce housing ordinance and be able to hit those numbers.
Sure, and
Because
we're not that
No
developer.
developer is going to develop it and then instantly turn it into a
Unfortunately, we're
co-op.
not that developer.
Right. Did you have something to say,
Any other
Dennis?
questions?
I would just like to remind or encourage the board to ask questions that help answer the 5 variance criteria questions.
I actually think these probably do when you're talking about the first criteria. But yes, I mean, I think we're all aware that when we come to deliberation, we may have to circle the
May I
wagons
ask
a little
Jordy
bit.
one more little question? All right, so Jordy, one thing I was looking at, so, did you look at finding a developer from construction and instead of putting manufactured housing, putting either modular housing that then people could own
It
the
would be more
land?
expensive to the consumer.
A way that people could own the land and still have
It
small
would be
lots?
more expensive for the consumer. They would, because we'll own it, they're not paying upfront for their share of this huge expense. Do you understand that?
Yeah, I do.
So
but
instead of being able to offer them a property at one price, well, we would have to offer them a property at a significantly higher price, also to cover our profit, to make it worth our while to go through all this.
Well, one little example, I only have one small sample here, but
Sure.
my son and his wife just bought, he's a teacher, new house in Florida, new construction. Their lot size is 50 feet by 55 wide.
Yeah.
They have a beautiful little house that's going to, on this tiny little lot,
Sure.
brand new, and they paid $350 for it. Now, I know $350 is high, but when I looked at the cost of modular houses, and this is not something that's come up, is that typically they are still running, a nice modular home is $150 to $200, Is that
Well,
about right?
I mean,
would you
modular
say?
is different than manufactured.
I'm sorry, not modular, manufactured. Modular would be more.
Yeah, modular would be more.
Manufactured was 150 to 200 with
Yeah, and
certain
I would say that
finishes.
that would be on the high side. You know, it depends. It depends by state, depends on a lot of criteria.
There's no way you can do this and people own the property.
Well, we're not. I mean, you might get an applicant that looks at another property that wants to do that, but that's not what we're doing here.
Okay, gotcha.
Sabette, this project is driven by what they consider a reasonable profit.
I gotcha.
And that's why they've come in with what they've come in
That's
with.
not-
However, this board can determine, is 90 units okay, or is 47 okay? We are not bound by what their maximum profit has to be. We can look at it as to what is in the best interest of the property, the land, and the town.
If we were going for, this is Michelle Hansen again, if we were going for just profit, we would have just split it into a dozen lots and built big houses and sold them. I mean, that would be more profitable right away. This is not just about profit. We feel that our peers need less expensive houses to buy. And we feel that our peers, families with kids, are missing a neighborhood in town. And this is what we're doing. It's not just about profit.
You wouldn't be doing it if you weren't making a profit.
Well,
Well,
the
of
profit's
course,
fine.
yes.
You're
That's
supposed to
how
make
real estate
profit.
works.
I mean, profit is fine.
Profit's fine, but it's to what extent we get to determine as to the number of units. That's what's going to drive it.
I would just like to comment that we're asking for 90, and I don't, as I understand it, the ZBA hearing is not a negotiation. You either grant the 90 or you deny it. It's not like you say.
Well,
we'll
no,
give you-
actually, we could say, we're going to grant 80, and then you can
okay.
take it or leave it.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's
I
possible.
didn't realize that was, okay.
It's not a negotiation. It's a matter of finding a factual basis for why we would come up with lesser units, and we have that.
Factual
purview.
basis based in one of the 5 criteria,
Right.
not just because we want to restrict profits.
Correct. Thank you.
And also, there's a potential of, up to a certain number of units, because the planning board, in the end, is going to potentially,
And if you'd like,
we don't know what they're going to do.
and if you'd like to give us more, we would not be adverse to that.
Indeed.
So,
90.
Had to add a little levity to the situation here. It's
Nice,
been too
Randy.
serious for an hour plus.
I would love to know how this application meets the 5 criteria.
Sure.
Does anybody else have any of these other technical or sociology questions?
No, we may after he does his presentation.
Okay.
And we knew we'd get into this discussion anyway, rather than having it on the backside, you get a lot of it up front. So we didn't waste any time per se. Just to circle back on a couple of the comments before I get into the criteria, and that is that Chris has represented that this site, which is 45 acres, I think he actually thinks it's 49, but we represented it as 45, can sustain 90 units. And the bulk of that land will be open space if we can cluster them in one area, double the size of the site, I guess, that your children have bought. He also believes that the DES will support this kind of density, and they indicated in Manchester they've got a project that's much bigger on less land. The biggest problem I think that we all have with this application, it has taken us days and days to try to figure out Wolfeboro's ordinance. It's conflicting, it's painful, it's torturous. Chris has spent days, I spent days, Tavis has spent days trying to just figure out what the ordinance permits.
You need to tell the planning board.
We do, and we will, and but it's been one of the challenges that we've had, and I'll address some of those as we go through. So let me just say a couple of things. We're obviously in a residential zone. We're in the R zone, our district, although I believe we'll meet the the criteria for the VR district, which permits greater density. This property is on a state highway, 45 acres roughly, and we've indicated as a condition of approval that you would merge those two lots together before the planning board. I just parenthetically say, if you look at the conservation subdivision on the 152C, it says, and I don't know if you all have your ordinances, but after you go through the density calculations, which Chris has done, at the end of that, on the next paragraph below it, it says minimum lot size. And it says the minimum lot area for residential dwelling sites shall be flexible. Shall be flexible. So even if you do the calculations, you still have flexibility. And this whole ordinance is designed, the conservation ordinance, for flexibility, that you have a lot of wiggle room. The planning board, I believe, has a lot of wiggle room, particularly if you look at the purposes and objectives of the ordinance. And I'll just start with those. The purpose of the conservation subdivision is to provide an alternative to the conventional residential subdivision, to encourage environmentally sound development. Again, if we cluster these homes 8 on an acre, which that's too dense, but if we do that, that means there's 30 plus acres that is open space, which is a goal of this ordinance, as Tim pointed out. It has diversity of lot sizes and building densities. It has diversity of building densities so that the community's population will be diverse. And one of the things that these applicants are trying to do is provide affordable housing. You've already approved 90 units right next door on the same size lot. It would be rental. This project will permit people to actually own their own homes, although they do rent the land underneath. So they're trying to provide a space in our real estate market that does not exist. The only other place we have in town like this is Birchill Estates, which is owned by the owners.
And it's 55 and older.
Say again?
It's 55 and older also, so it's restricted.
It is, which blocks out all the young people. We've got some people who the children are still living with them, with their kids, because they have no place to go in Wolfeboro because we don't have housing. And this will open a niche, regardless of whether they make a profit or don't make a profit. It's an absolute need. And last hearing, I provided a number of newspaper articles, and I could have provided them again this time, that we absolutely have a need for this. We've already been to TRC that looked favorably upon it. Planning board conceptually looked favorably upon it. We're hopeful that this board can see its way clear to permit this density so that we can go forward. So let me get into the criteria. That the variance will not be contrary to the public interest. As we note in the zoning board's Board of Adjustment handbook, that for the variance to be contrary to the public interest, it must unduly and in a marked degree conflict with the ordinance such that the variance violates the ordinance's basic zoning objectives. To determine this, the question is, does it alter the essential character of the neighborhood? We suggest that it will not. And does it threaten the public health, safety, and welfare? And again, we suggest that it does not. Specifically, when this board just approved 90 units right next door, same road, same area, same size, 90 units are okay there. Why wouldn't they be okay in this property? Right next door. They're both remote, they're both off the road, where you won't see them. And they're going to be like Harriman Hill, a great development, which you can't see. You drive by it, you see the entrance, but you don't really know what's in there. And they've got multiple buildings in there. Sugar Hill, same thing. You drive by it, you see the entrance, you drive up in a complex of buildings up there. Birchill Estates, the same way. None of those have altered the essential character of the neighborhood because you don't even know that they're there. This is a state highway. As we drive by on Route 109A, you won't even know that it's there, like those other developments, all three of which are wonderful additions to this town. And we do have an urgent need for reasonably priced housing in Wolfeboro, which our master plan suggests we should have. And we have a low supply and we have an unmet demand. Homes in Birchill Estates go like this. People are trying to get in there. I mentioned last hearing, I'm the trustee of a trust that just sold a home in there. It sold within 3 hours, and we had call after call after call after it was under agreement because We can't meet that demand. This project will meet that demand, and it'll be a nice addition to Wolfeboro.
Randy, what did it sell for?
Say again?
How much did it sell for?
It hasn't closed yet, and I do have an attorney-client privilege, so I can't disclose that. But you'll see it on June 15th.
Okay.
I've seen some in the paper. I just have to say, people are desperate. I mean, I just don't think this is a normal real estate period of time, but I understand they're selling.
And we're dealing with two real estate agents here that know this market extremely well, that have lived here their entire lives, and they know that that's a niche that needs to be filled, and this project will fill that niche. And what's the best way to provide reasonably priced housing is to allow higher density, which is what they're asking for today. Particularly with material costs going up, road costs going up, if we can have shorter roads, shorter utility runs, more open space, it keeps the price down, which is a plus, which is why we're asking for a variance from this board to help us out to accomplish that mission. So I think it's undisputed that providing reasonable priced housing would meet the public interest and would enhance the public's safety, health, and welfare, as well as the stress that's caused on a lot of people by not being able to have housing that they can call their own. This variance is also being requested because we're in a residential zone. You know, we're not asking for a variance to get outside of the district. The use is permitted in this district, and it's a mixed-use district. There's residential, there's commercial, industrial, again, such that it will not change the essential character of the neighborhood, particularly when you drive by. So number two, the spirit of the ordinance is observed because, and again, as noted in the handbook, you can't alter the essential character of the neighborhood or the public health, safety, or welfare, and given the size of this parcel, which is one of the largest within a 1 mile area, and you already found that special conditions met last time on the other twin to this, that met the special conditions. And we have natural buffering around this. There'll be a 50-foot buffer around the entire perimeter of this such that you won't really be able to see it. And therefore, the requested density, even if it's a little higher than may be permitted under a pure reading of the net development density calculation, it will not alter the essential character. Again, as I mentioned, the Technical Review Committee looked at this, got a favorable review, somewhat uncharacteristically. They went to TRC before the zoning board. We went conceptually to the planning board before we came here, and again received a favorable response, which is why we're proceeding forward. And finally, again, reasonably priced residential housing always is beneficial to the public's health, safety, and welfare. Number three, substantial justice will be done, and as the Zoning Board of Adjustment Handbook suggests, that perhaps the only guiding rule is that any loss to the individual is not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. By that standard, this variance would do substantial justice. The loss to the applicant would certainly outweigh any potential gain to the general public by saying you can't have 90 units. What's the detriment of 90 units to the general public? None. Other than we're going to provide needed housing for employees in town. Our office has 3 employees, I said this last time, that live in Ossipee that would love to live in Wolfeboro. They cannot find a place to rent or buy that they can afford, and we pay them pretty well. The benefit to the applicant is clear that we'd have 90 manufactured housing units. The general public will also be benefited by the provision of significant and needed residential owner-occupied housing with generous open space, available walking trails, solar generation, all of which is consistent with a master plan and will be shielded from the public view. In essence and in substance, substantial justice will be done. 4, the value of surrounding properties will not diminish because, and I'll point out that we submitted letters last time by a number of the abutters, which is in your file, which will just incorporate by reference, that we're in favor of all 7 of the variances that we've submitted. We had nobody speak against this last time. I don't believe anybody will speak against this project this time, but if they do, we'll address it. But there's no objection that we're aware of to this project by anybody. Around town, the buzz has been, this is something we need. The response has been very favorable. So will values of surrounding properties go down? They will not. We have two real estate agents who are also the applicants who will testify that will not be the case, particularly given the buffer that's going to surround this property, and it will not be visible from the road. Again, like the other three projects that I mentioned, you won't even know that it's here. It'll also provide an area for, I'll call it workforce housing, but I don't like to use that word, but GI Plastique is an abutter to this project, and you talk to the president of GI Plastique, which now is a different name, they've changed their name. He said one of the biggest problems he has is his employees can't find places to live in Wolfeboro. This project goes in, they'll literally be able to walk to work. The school district, they can walk to work to the SAU. Hancock Lumber, they can walk to work. If they work at Sugar Hill, they can walk to Sugar Hill. They work at Harriman Hill, they could walk. So we don't believe that there will be any diminution in the value of surrounding properties. And again, you have 4 letters from at least 4 of the neighbors saying, we don't believe there'll be any diminution at all. As a matter of fact, we're in favor of this project. We'd like this to go forward, even though it's going to be right on our doorstep. And then last, will little enforcement result in unnecessary hardship? And we believe that it absolutely will. Number one, you permitted a multifamily project right next door, same exact density, 90 units. There's no difference between the land masses. Both have 45 acres, same exact density. How can you deny it on one or grant it on one and then deny it on the other? I'll also suggest that Wolfeboro has a tiered system of development for residential homes. We have village residential, residential, GR. The VR zone basically says municipal water and sewer. As a condition of approval, we've invited you to say you shall have water and sewer. Well, this project doesn't go forward. But if you have water and sewer, the density is 1/2 an acre and 1/4 acre. Now, we're not in the VR zone, but we should be. Wolfeboro, in my opinion, didn't contemplate when they created the residential zones. They said, if you have water and sewer, we know where that is in Wolfeboro. Everybody on that is in the VR zone. If you're only on water but not on sewer, you're in a residential zone. But they didn't contemplate that somebody might change where they are. Now, we had a sewer extension at the end of Sewell Road. We had a sewer extension that we got through about 4 years ago on the end of Clark Road. And so they've evolved where they were because they've actually picked up these services. This project would do the same. It's in the residential zone technically, but we're going to qualify for all the criteria in the high-density VR zone. So why would you discriminate against manufactured housing in this zone if we could be permitted to do it when we meet all the criteria? Another reason that we need a variance. It's a hardship that is unnecessary when you meet the criteria for the higher density area. And then lastly, the conservation subdivision, just on this point, it's designed to be flexible. This board has flexibility. The whole purpose of this board is to permit things that may not be permitted, but even the ordinance itself says that you can be flexible. 175, 147, entitled Objectives under the Conservation Subdivision, says to allow flexibility and creativity in design, reduce the length of roads. We tried to do all of those things. Utility runs, check that box. Reduce the amount of paving. We're trying to cluster it at one end so we have less infrastructure costs. So the cost to the end user, the people that will buy homes in here, will be less. If we have to spread it all out and put in a road that's twice as long, it's going to cost the developer twice as much, which means the land rent will be higher. Not productive. It says to discourage development sprawl. We've tried to discourage that. We've tried to bring that development in there. And again, this board has that flexibility, just like the planning board does under the ordinance. So what special conditions exist? The same that existed last time on the property right next door. Same geographic location, same size, one of the largest parcels within a 1 mile area. Very unique, truly special, remotely located, even though it's on a state highway with access. It's behind those commercial spots, such as Wicker's, GI Plastique, Eastern Propane. And we have Wolfeboro's sewer treatment plant on the backside of this property, which is helpful for access. So those special conditions, again, which I believe this board has already found on an identical property right next door, has all the physical criteria. So due to those special conditions that distinguish it from other properties, I don't believe there's any fair and substantial relationship that exists between the purposes of the ordinance, which is to allow reasonably priced housing in an area, and the application of that specific provision to this property. It was noted in the handbook, it says, to answer this question, the board should ask whether the restriction on the property is necessary to give full effect. And it isn't necessary to give full effect. You want to say, oh, you can only have 25 or 36 or 79 or 90 or 180, whatever that number is. What's the purpose? The purpose for us is to try to provide affordable housing in that area, reasonably priced housing in that area. And the purpose of the ordinance is not frustrated by allowing us 90, particularly when you just allowed 90 next door. Given the remoteness of this property, its size, its natural buffering, the connection to municipal services, there is no fair and substantial relationship that exists between the density restriction set forth in the Conservation Commission subdivision and the variance that's requested. So now let me just dissect a few things, if I could, and just expand on what Chris said. And I'll just start with multifamily. If this were a multifamily project, we could have 2 units per acre, which is what you permitted last time for the project right next door. And multifamily says that it trumps all other areas. So if we were to put a multifamily in here, we could get that same density, 45 acres times 2 acres. You get it in, I believe it's 175, 144 of the ordinance. And that says that section trumps or supersedes all other provisions, and under 175, 144B, entitled density, it says for lots which are served by both municipal water and sewer, again, we agree that should be a condition of approval, that the density shall not exceed 2 units per acre. So if you allow that, why wouldn't you allow this? We can get that density in other ways, and there's no fair and substantial reason why you shouldn't allow it in this case. On the conservation subdivision calculations, I want to take off on something that Tavis said earlier and that I had discussed with him, and that is when you do the calculations, before you even get to the calculations, it talks about flexibility and innovation and creativity, which we're trying to do all of those things. And it gets into the permitted density, and it says the following steps shall be determined to compute maximum density. Goes on to say areas within road right-of-ways and or easements shall be excluded. So you exclude the roads. That's what it says. By the way, the conservation subdivision supersedes all other regulations. So you take the roads out. So if the road's 50 feet wide and it goes in 1,000 feet, that's a mile of road, but an acre, I don't know what that computes to, but it's not a big number. And it definitely isn't 20% that the net development density calculation suggests you use. So it says back out the roads. So then it directs you to a whole nother section of the ordinance, net development density, which is a defined term, some 30 pages later in the ordinance. And you get to that, and it says that you utilize the build-out density utilizing the conventional development practices. Well, why would you use the conventional development practices if you're in the conservation subdivision? It sends us to this other area that says we're going to calculate it with the conventional development practices, which is completely anathema to the purpose of the conservation subdivision, which is to be creative and flexible. So it says you take the total area, 45 acres, you back out very poorly trained soil. Chris has indicated we have 0. And then you back out slopes at 15%. I always ask why, if you can build on those slopes, but they ask you to back that out. And then it says take 20% of the road area out. But it had already said you're not supposed to take the road acreage into the calculation at all. And because the conservation subdivision trumps it, I don't think that that definition even applies, or arguably doesn't apply, which is one of the struggles that we had with our ordinance. It just conflicts. There's no way you can resolve that conflict. This board could grant a variance, however, that says, despite that, we'll give you this. My point is that it would allow for a greater density if you follow the first part of it, which says take out the actual road area, which isn't anywhere near 20%, which would increase the density that Chris conservatively came up with. And then if you go on to the conservation subdivision, the next paragraph, 152C, entitled minimum lot size, it says the minimum lot area for dwelling sites shall be flexible. Shall be flexible. So can you pick other numbers than the 1 acre requirement? I suggest that you can. So even if you follow the net development density calculations, it says, what do you divide it by at the end? 1 acre, because that's what the residential zone has. But if it can be flexible on the minimum lot sizes, what if we only divided it by half an acre? Now we can get twice the amount of units. So I think that you arguably have the flexibility of doing that, and I think the planning board similarly has that. So the problem is the ordinance keeps having these sections that supersede other sections. Multifamily supersedes everything else. But so does the conservation subdivision regulations. What happens when those two conflict? Which one trumps the other? But both trump a lot of these other provisions. So we've struggled, and we spent a lot of time trying to figure out what is permitted. But at the end of the day, the bottom line question is, will this 45 acres sustain 90 units? It absolutely will. Chris indicates that. The DES, we're very confident will approve it. We have 90 acres already approved by this board on the lot right next door, 90 units right on the lot next door. And based on all of that, again, that there is no fair and substantial reason for denying the variance when we could otherwise qualify for that exact same type of density, or if you don't feel that we should, but you believe we meet the criteria, then we respectfully request that you approve it. And the last part is the proposed use reasonable? Well, it's a residential use in a residential zone that we don't believe will have any negative impact on the neighborhood. It'll provide for needed owner-occupied housing, again, reasonable, consistent with the master plan, reasonable. It'll have less sites than Birchill Estates, which again is a park which nicely served Wolfeboro and has served Wolfeboro since the 80s. And so for all of those reasons, we would respectfully request that you approve this variance application, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
So conservation trumps residential, right? Where does manufactured housing overlay district? What? Because that was another one that we were looking at, right? No?
Yeah. So
where does that?
No, it doesn't take a precedent over conservation or vice versa.
yeah, it doesn't really apply directly. My belief is the reason that we did the manufactured housing overlay district was simply to say you can't discriminate against manufactured housing units. A lot of towns were trying to zone them out and said we didn't want, mobile homes.
Okay.
And my belief was that they said you can put these anywhere in town that you can put a regular house. And it's a very short ordinance. It's only several pages.
But how much weight do we give that?
Towards which part?
Well, because the manufactured housing overlay district requires
It has no
individually owned
Right.
lots.
Which is a separate subject.
Separate than,
Right, so we'll be hearing a
Separate
variance
than
on that.
density.
Yes.
Okay,
correct.
gotcha.
Because
Okay.
it can be dense with individually owned lots, or it can be dense with not individually owned lots.
And
Okay.
these are just sites, just going to be one owner of the whole
I
property.
got that,
Just sites,
but-
yeah.
Well, that's what the desire is, yes. That's what the third variance speaks to.
I think I'd like to hear from the public.
Yeah, okay.
And then if we need more questions, we
Sure.
can address Attorney Walker after.
Is there anybody here that would like to speak in favor of the project? Seeing none, is there anybody here would like to speak in opposition to the project? Okay, I think we've heard from the public.
Let's also ask the question.
Can you use your microphone?
Let's also ask the question, is there anyone like to speak in general about the project?
Is there anybody who would like to speak in general about the project? There we go. Hi, come on up.
My name is Roseanne Bell, and I live in Wolfeboro. My concern is conservation.
You get to steep the microphone.
Oh, sorry, conservation. I'm worried about wetlands, you know, how this all works. I'm not familiar with the property. I have not been on that property. I know where it is in terms of driving by it, but I'm just concerned what happens with wetlands, animals, any kind of wildlife that lives there. That is my concern. What are we doing about, you know, eradicating all of that? Has anybody looked into that? Or is that something that gets done down the road after the density part's taken care of? I'm just concerned, it's a beautiful state. I just moved here 2 years ago. My husband's been here for 10 years. And I just don't want to see our area being kind of destroyed or manipulated in any way with, I understand what the need is for workforce housing, or whatever you want to call it. I do understand that. It's everywhere. My children have that problem. They rent, and it's expensive. Wherever they live in apartments, they don't even live in a house, and it's very, very expensive for them. And we need workers. I want to enforce, you know, give young people that ability, but, you know, we're all talking about environment right now, so what's going on there? I appreciate the board and everything you're doing and asking questions about. Thank you very much. Good evening.
Thank you. We have another public. Yep.
Hi, my name is Mitch Marrow. I live at 239 Pine Hill Road, just up the way of where the entrance and the exit will be for the that part of the development, with my wife, Sue, who's a lifelong resident here in Wolfeboro, born in Huggins Hospital. I was born in Huggins Hospital too, but I married her, and then I moved over here in Wolfeboro. So I spent a lot of time over at Abenaki ski area growing up, and I love this area. I love that spot. I'm really concerned about how much traffic will occur on that road. People all over New England tell me how much they love Abenaki and all the trails, the hill, and the skating rink. And I'm just worried that there'll be so much traffic there, and they'll start cutting through Wambach Road to get there. It's been stated a lot that the Pine Hill Preserve might be a bit similar to the Birches, but my wife and I completely disagree. The proposed manufactured home park will not be anything like the Birches. The Birches is made up of 180 acres with 106 homes, generously sized lots. Pine Hill Preserve will be 45 acres in that area of the mobile home park with 90 trailers. The Birches of Wolfeboro is a 55 and over community with no one under 40 allowed. Lots are large enough in the Birches to have natural buffers, trees, woods. Pine Hill would not allow that. They're so densely, the plan is to put them so close together. Most homes in the Birches have 1 or 2 car garages. Many of them have sunroofs, and that's why the prices are so high over there. A majority of homes in the Birches are double wide and approximately 1,500 square feet. There is also a limit of 2 pets. And of course, the Birches is a co-op. Well, the land is owned by the owners of the Birches. And this allows for the rents to stay well below market value. The Birches is a beautiful, well-designed, manufactured housing park that the town of Wolfeboro can be proud of. It is a wonderful community and a neighborhood for everyone who lives there. It's probably the best manufactured home park in the state of New Hampshire. And we've been compared a lot to that Birch Hill, and now I see that this is being compared to a park in Manchester. So I'm a little concerned about that. I just want the board to be careful on the decisions that we make tonight when these depreciate in the next 10 or 20 years, and if a new owner comes around, who knows what's going to happen then. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else who would like to speak? Randy, would you like to speak again?
If there's any particular questions before you close discussion, I always like to at least get those rather than, I'll say, get blindsided if there's anything particularly that someone has.
And the chair doesn't like to reopen the hearing, so, yes.
Chair, I have a couple questions.
Yeah, please.
We've been talking something about pricing and all, and the question I had was, are we able at this point to determine if you took an ordinary apartment downtown and determined what the rent is, and they're realtors, they must know this, and if you compared that to what someone would pay as their rental fee on the property, the site, the lot, whatever you want to call it, and that's something I think we need to discuss, and the average payment that they would be making on their pre-manufactured, site-built, whatever home you want to call it. We're trying not to call it a trailer, okay? So how does the rental downtown compare to what someone would be paying between the cost of the housing itself and this monthly reoccurring fee? Would they be...
Mortgage. They're likely paying a mortgage.
Right, the cost for their housing, that would be their mortgage, yeah. And is this something that's going to be somewhat similar? Is this something that's going to be seen as more affordable? Is this something that might turn out being more pricey in the name of profit? Or it's kind of...
So I don't know the answer to your question myself. I don't know that that falls into the criteria particularly. But, and we do, by the way, call them manufactured housing units, MHU. I think the statute changed in 1986, where we went from trailers, which were considered personal property, to real estate, so that manufactured housing units are now considered real estate. You can buy and sell them only with a deed. But I don't have the answer to your economic question, other than there is a significant need. The only other park that we have in Wolfeboro, which everyone agrees is a wonderful park, and I believe there that the fees are about $350 a month.
Right. They brought up costs first.
But
okay, my other question.
I could just follow up conceptually that if this park was up and running, these units would all be gone. People would be buying these up quickly. There's a demand for this type of property, which Wolfeboro has precious little of. We just don't have it. You buy a $4.5 million waterfront property, you can buy a lot for maybe $500,000 with a house on it. You will find very little less than that.
Well, Spet was talking about pricing, and we have this sheet here that talk about 5 years, 19% here and 34% appreciation value. And Spet, I'm not sure if they really became more valuable or they just ended up being the only thing available. Yeah. But my second question is relative to, you referred to this residential and multifamily and all, having water and sewer. Let us not forget that they have water. Right now, they have no public sewer. They have to come up with their own sewer on site and then turn it over to the town. May 2nd, 2022, from Mr. Ford, following up January 7th, 2022, about the issues with adding to our sewer system. And, we don't want to forget, when we're talking about whether this is affordable for some people and not affordable for other people, sewer prices are amongst the highest in the state, and all the people that have it pay for is operating costs. Everybody else in town pays for the capital costs. So when we're going over our points and we're trying to determine the fairness and all, we need to look at that when you're looking at the fairness of the whole project and, do we have adequate health, safety, and welfare to accommodate this large number of units?
So to just address the question, number one, we've suggested as a conditional approval, we do want to have water and sewer municipally provided, and that Dave Ford was, I believe, euphoric in his praise of this project at the TRC. Jordy could maybe elaborate more on that.
Well, he didn't come here and become euphoric for us.
Dave Ford did write a letter in support of this project. I believe you have it in your file. And our sewer proposal is something that Chris Berry, our engineer, and Dave Ford came up with. And it would be a effluent disposal system that we would construct on site. And at that time, we would turn it over to the town for management at our expense. And by doing that, it would qualify as municipal sewer, and yet it wouldn't be adding to the sewer load on the town sewer.
Right, based on the fact.
So it qualifies as sewer.
Sarah, could you get closer to your microphone, please?
Right, because it says sewage from this project would have to be pumped a long distance municipal treatment plant, and the economics just don't make sense.
Correct. And then he goes on to say that I think that the plan explain our
and
proposal.
you have no cost for that yet, and you have no approved plan for that yet.
Well, we haven't designed it yet because we haven't.
You haven't designed it yet.
Well, we wouldn't design it before we got approved by you because
No, why would you
we
do
can't
that?
design
We don't have
it.
a survey yet.
We have actually the survey has been completed, Sarah.
What?
The survey has been completed. Chris told you that at the beginning of the meeting.
Okay.
So apparently maybe that was missed. The survey, the topography have all been completed.
So do you have anything else to add to your question, Sarah? Or your comment, I should say. I want to finish with Sarah because I want to follow up a comment after you're done, and then I will get to you.
I have one question on this.
Can you hang on? Sarah, are you done with that?
For those two questions, yes.
Okay. I just want to add that I believe the point is that the density for water and sewer is based on whether a property has water and a septic system or water and sewer. So I understand your comparison, but this has water and a septic system. So the density calculation for the village residential, I don't think really applies as an argumentative point.
Yeah, but it would qualify, we believe, as a municipal water and sewer system for the density calculations.
Is there another one like this that
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Again, we're trying to be creative and get
That's
back
just
to Sarah's.
my take on that argument is that the issue is disposing of the effluent on the lot, and that's why the density is different.
Well, but what it says specifically in 175, 144B, for lots which are served by both municipal water and sewer, the density shall not exceed 2 units per acre. For any other lot, the density shall not exceed 2 units per acre as required by high-intensity soil survey standards, whichever is less. And you have your report that says
Correct.
it's more.
Yeah.
So it,
I was just talking to the argumentative point, not that it had any vast difference in the
I just wanted
balance.
the whole board to know it's not just water and sewer equals 2. If you also meet it with HIS mapping, or as Chris laid out with the NRCS mapping, you still get to the same point. So you're still at 2 units per acre, whether or not the RVR comparison holds water.
And we did
Take
get,
Tim's question, or?
if I could just
Okay.
follow up on that, and we did get that same project next door. It's the same thing. Exact same water and sewer loading. They have you two units per acre.
It's a different zone.
Say again?
It's a different zone.
Same concept, though. Still, same 45 acres, 90 units, same water sewer, identical.
The concept is we can either pump you our effluent and then it has to be disposed of, or we dispose of it on site. And any way you slice it, it's going into the ground.
I get it. I have a septic system. I understand.
At the same rate. So it's just a matter of whether or not it's publicly or privately owned. And
I don't even think that's the point, but we've already been over that. Tim?
I had the questions that came out on the other side of the table here on costs and whatnot. Taxes. Are the taxes included in the monthly HOA fees, or is that something they're going to be assessed on top of it?
We, the owners, would be paying property taxes. They would pay property tax just on their structure. For the land property tax, we will be paying.
Taxes.
Yeah, like a condo.
Yes.
Yeah, as I understand it, each trailer gets its own tax bill.
That's right.
Want to correct me on that?
Yeah, it's a manufactured housing unit. Otherwise, you're right.
So that's based on the value of the unit, not on the value of the land. So they each get a tax bill.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, and it is important to note that it's on the plus side, it is taxed as real estate, not personal property,
Correct.
which is better for the owner. Correct? Some states tax it as personal property.
However it's assessed, they'll figure it out, but the individual
They
will be
pay
getting their
taxes.
own tax bill.
But the good, if you think of that from a positive light, they're also then paying taxes that contribute to schools, infrastructure, et cetera, for the town of Wolfeboro. That's a plus.
On the low end.
Okay, but they're paying taxes.
Makes it
Back
more
to-
makes it more affordable if it's on the low
Ba-
end.
Back to where, Sarah? I did this at the last meeting, too. Back to where.
We've only
Sa-
known her for 40 years.
I know. Back to where she was about asking about the economics of this whole thing. At the last meeting, I asked a similar question, and I still presume that there is some sort of magic number in these developers' minds that's going to make this thing click. I don't expect you're going to give it to us, and I don't need it, because it doesn't matter. You're selling it as blue-collar housing. When the paperwork is signed on all of this by the planning board and the ZBA, you can charge whatever you want. Whatever the high end of that market will bear is what you can charge. Now, morally, hey, maybe you wouldn't do it, but you certainly financially can, so it doesn't matter to me what that is. I had a second question, now I
The more
forgot it.
complicated the project, the more it costs. The longer it takes, the more it costs. One of the reasons that our electric rates are so high is because it took so long to develop our, not Wolfeboro's electric rates, state of New Hampshire electric rates. It took so long to get Seaburg 1 online versus Seaburg 2. It's just that same type of argument. The more you have to go through from a paperwork standpoint, the more it ultimately costs.
Well, let's look at it this way. This is Wolfeboro. It's a very affluent community. No one can deny that.
That's affluent.
Affluent. Yes, it's affluent.
Affluent.
Add a little levity to the situation.
Okay, and it seems like it would be a nice opportunity for the affluent people to buy one of these units, live here for the summer, through the fall, and then snowbird down south. And then, and they can charge it would be very easily charge a nice sum of money for the affluent to live like that. So I'm really tired of hearing about how they can walk to work and they will afford one of these units. That's all going to shake itself out when this is all done. And until then, I know they've got numbers in their head, and they don't have to tell us those numbers, but when they walk away, those numbers will be whatever they want them to be. Period.
Well, I think
and
that
you
you're
can't
right
convince me otherwise.
on one of the things about snowbirds. We have a client that's in the Roby campground, and they have like a $2 million house in Florida that they go to in the winter, and then they stay in basically a trailer manufactured housing unit in the summertime, but it's a good balance for them, and that allows them to afford at both ends. So you probably will get some snowbirds.
Well, may I say something? I mean, talking about the cost of all this, it's kind of tough because what am I trying to say? Even put the snowbirds aside, we all want to do something. We all want to create something. I know this, that we all want to create something that is affordable for teachers, people that are waiters, waitresses, staff people in your office. We do, but it has to be safe. It has to be something that they can hold on to for a long time. I actually love the apartments because to me that was affordable, and it was, it didn't require a lot of ownership. When you run the numbers for this a little bit, just to kind of counter the affordability argument, I just checked, and Jordy would know better than I, but like a 5% interest rate right now on a $150,000 manufactured house might come out to be about $800, $850 a month for their mortgage, assuming they put 20% down. And by the way, in my research, one of the things I found is that lenders are not as amenable to providing loans for manufactured houses as they are homes that are stick-built. Now, I could be wrong, but I checked that out. It's a little harder to get that loan, so it may actually cost you a little bit more money. They actually charge more in insurance for a manufactured home, even though they are very well built and they meet the HUD standards. So you've got your mortgage, you've got your insurance. Now you've got so maybe you're at $900 or $1,000. Now you've got your $400 to $500 fee, HOA type fee, which would be a fair fee for what you have to charge. It costs a lot of money to move one of these houses here. And they're not as movable as some people like to think. They need to be put on, we didn't ask about that, but they need to be put on a foundation that is a true foundation. They can be moved, but it's tricky. So, you're still looking at somebody paying $1,500 plus a month.
That sounds really reasonable for a 3-bedroom.
That's what, Jordy?
We can't talk from the
Oh,
audience.
and you said it's not reasonable?
I said that sounds very reasonable for a 3-bedroom.
And I watched the video.
Well, and those are my just off the top of my head estimates. But but it's not like dirt cheap when we talk about I just think we need to have a number that we're kind of holding on to for an idea.
The video from the manufacturer shows it on a steel frame, and they jack it up, take the wheels off, and set it down. That's the way they say they set these things.
It's a little more than that from what I read. And maybe they can speak to the kind of foundation, because it's not as easy.
On a pad. They put it on a pad.
Or an actual foundation. Some of them actually have dug basements or something. But
Basically, there's 0 apartments available in Wolfeboro, and you look under 300,000, there's almost 0 available in Wolfeboro for a house or a manufactured housing unit. There is no market there. The ability to make this happen, to be flexible, creative, innovative, and to approve a needed project, which nobody in Wolfeboro really is opposing.
Does anybody else have a question for
Sure.
Can I
the
just
attorney?
ask one quick clarifier?
Yes, absolutely.
The lots are going to be 50 by 20, and the
50
units,
by 100
50
minimum.
by 126 by 54 is the side of the unit.
That's what he says.
And
Yes.
what size was the unit?
26 wide on a lot that's 50 wide.
I don't know if any of those dimensions will be binding after this review. If you're using it for your thinking, that's fine, but those are not set in stone or
Well, I'm
requirements.
just looking at the picture where they're cheek to cheek here.
Yeah, but the picture is not binding either.
And that's the problem. Nothing's set in stone, so it's all hypothetical.
Well, not really. The one thing that's not hypothetical is whether the board will grant variance relief for 90 units or not. How the 90 units occur
Well,
is not this board.
They gave us some numbers, so those are the numbers we have to use, which she's reading. 50 by 100 and 26 by what?
54.
54.
So those are the numbers we use.
Because I heard someone talk about something about they'd need garages or something, and they also alluded to Harriman Hill. Harriman Hill had these little duplexy jobs up there, and then they went in and tore apart their conservation easement because they had to make bigger places because they didn't have any storage, so they need to add garages, I guess. So I'm looking, okay, if I got 12 feet on either side, they're probably going to try to, hypothetically, Tavis, they're going to probably try to center it, which means you hardly have room to park a car on either side.
Isn't that a planning board question, though?
Well, but you get to take that into your mind when you're going through the right criteria. How is it going to aesthetically look? We're allowed to think about that.
Yes, we are.
And that is the concept, is to have cluster if we can, to keep costs down, which this ordinance promotes, reducing road length,
Right.
utility runs, less pavement, less plowing and maintenance over the life of the project. But we have to have at least, I think, 50% open space no matter what. So we could bump out a little bit. Like, I think it was suggested that these projects, this one might have 7,000 or 8,000 square feet. We just suggested 5, but even if we bumped it out a little bit more to cover, say, 20 acres, you still got 25.
But then they get some wetlands.
I got to add something to that.
Uh-huh.
Approximately 26 by 54. That will fit in my barn. That's how small it is in the lot. The lot would fit in my barn practically. So that's.
I'm sorry, but that's way bigger than my house.
Well.
And that's just
but
Suzanne's barn.
Your house sits on a lot. Your
should
house
see the
sits on
house.
a lot by itself. These are going to be
But these are
clustered in,
single
one on
story.
top of the other.
These are single story too. You have to take that into consideration.
This is a point of reference. I lived for 30 years in a house that was on 4,000 square feet. And it had a nice little private backyard, and I was very comfortable there.
4,000?
4,000 square foot lot.
And he was very comfortable. That's the takeaway.
That's 40 by 100, roughly.
Well, that's almost an acre. 4,000
that's
acres,
1/10 of an
46,
acre.
46,
Tenth of an
20
acre.
something.
No,
It's a tenth of an
4,000 is 40 by 100 feet. We're
1/10
talking
of an
50
acre.
by 100 here. So
I
the
lived on a lot with 50 by 100. It was a great house.
50 by 100 can be made into a very nice
Go to
environment.
downtown Newburyport, and probably you will be on a lot this size. Portsmouth, even.
Bottom line, it's very
But
livable.
this is different. We are allowed to look at it from an aesthetic value for, certain criteria. And if you have any more questions with regard to the layout or the size, let's ask them.
I'd like to know if we can continue this and the other items, say, in 2 weeks.
You would have to make a motion and see how the board feels.
What do you want to know in 2 weeks?
We haven't had a chance to digest what's been said against what we have for paperwork that we got Friday. And then this is like a house of cards. All the other things are contingent upon this, and this is contingent upon those. So I think it's up to the voting members, but I would like to see a continuation in 2 weeks. It's not a hardship.
Is that a motion?
I would make a motion to please consider continuing this in 2 weeks from this Monday.
I'd second that because I'd want to discuss it.
Okay, we have a second for discussion.
I think if we continue it, that we need to allow ourselves enough time to talk to town attorney, because I have several questions that I would like to ask town attorney before we make decisions on this. We do have, as Mr. Walker has pointed out, some conflicts here, and I think we also have some basic things that is it a lot? Is it a site? And I think there are a lot of things here, and this is a permanent change in our community. We owe it to the people that put us here to make good decisions, to get the information we need to make those good decisions.
I'll second
And
that
I'm not an
amendment.
attorney, and I don't
Is that
pretend.
is that an amendment?
To
Okay.
invite council to,
Well, it's just continuing. If you
us.
want to continue and invite council, that's fine. It's up to you guys to get questions to council and get answers in 2
well,
weeks.
in person.
So you seconded it for discussion. Does anybody else have any discussion having to do with the continuance
I agree
motion?
with having it pop up in 2 more weeks, but also meet with Laura, our zoning board attorney, because of the email that she sent on May 10th. It says she thinks manufactured homes need to be on individual lots. 17550 refers to specific development requirements, and 175-152 is entitled Development Requirements. So if something is addressed as 152, it prevails over other general ordinance agreements, or requirements, rather. Nowhere in 152 does it address lots versus sites, and since Article 3 specifically says they have to be on individual lots, it seems to me that that is much more specific, and therefore prevailing ordinance section 152B and C do give some flexibility on the density issue.
So what do you not understand about that needs more? I mean, she's saying that the variance that's coming up after this is actually that one.
I just would like to talk to her about it.
Okay. So
Thank you.
anybody else have any comments on
All the
continuing?
questions?
So my thing is...
If you do
is
2 weeks, you're going to have to find a different room.
If we do 2 weeks, we need to find a different room.
Maybe we could hear better.
We'll find a different room, I'm
Right.
sure.
So
What I'm saying is,
still-
if you continue to a date and time specific, we need to know what that is.
I will.
Audrey, my only other concern is 2 weeks, do we have time to get an appointment with attorney to see her in
I'm sure.
person?
She's our attorney.
I know, but people have to be able to come whenever she's available.
We gotta set a date for them too. She's on the call list.
You don't, does the town take Juneteenth as a holiday? Because that's 2 weeks.
I'm not aware of Juneteenth. I'm looking at the Cable Franchise Committee meeting from 6 to 8.
Okay, so you're open. That's what I was asking.
If they're a small group, why can't they move?
I'd like to just add one more thing to my
Hey,
statement.
Okay.
First, I mean, I respect Randy a lot. I mean, I think he's made a very good case, but I also respect Laura Spencer Morgan. And there seems to be some conflict between the two, and I just want to know what's right. It has nothing to do with the individuals.
Kate, do you have anything to say before the question is voted on?
No, I agree with what Tim said.
Okay. All in favor of continuing for 2 weeks until the 20th in Town Hall someplace? Is that good enough, or do we have to say this room?
With this size group of a ZBA, this is the only room in Town Hall. We can't fit in the conference room. Neither of the other conference rooms are big enough for 9 ZBA plus applicant, plus council.
So
Do you want
what's
to?
going on
library.
at the 27th in this room? I mean, we're not locked into the
Find another
20th.
date.
What about the
Well,
library?
that's fine. I was just
Library
looking
has
with
a
the
big room.
motion. You could go
Yeah,
on
we
the
just need to-
22nd, 23rd, 24th, 26th through the 30th. But I can't speak for the applicant and I can't speak for council.
Be here. Which one's the furthest out? The 20 what, 6 or 7?
27th.
Okay. Amend the motion to say to meet at the town hall on the 27th, 7 o'clock.
That gives
All in
us-
favor?
Don't you
Wait.
need a second?
Oh,
No, I know, but if
For
you're
the
changing
time?
the date, don't we need to second it? Oh,
Shouldn't we check with these folks if they're available for that date?
folks, are you available for the 27th?
Are you keeping the public hearing open or is this for
Yeah.
deliberation?
No,
Okay.
public hearing.
Okay, because that's relevant to whether
Yep.
that fits with them.
I have no idea whether I'm open that day or not as I stand here. although it would always be nice, and I've suggested this a number of times, to never use this room because the acoustics are so bad.
I agree.
I know.
The old library was beautiful. It was
Yeah.
a good size. Acoustics were great. You could hear, and as we,
We
all
would
get
fit
a
in the
little older,
library.
it's
Well,
tougher.
the library has a nice big-size meeting
Can't hear
room.
any better in there than you do here.
So if you
carpeted.
want,
They
you
don't
can
have
vote
a
on the
sound
27th
system.
here, and if
Budget
it needs to
committee
be
met there.
moved,
can't
we
fit
can
in.
still accommodate that because there's 10 days to renotice
can't
for a
hear.
different location.
There, no.
They'll
Then
be
the
here.
budget
If
committee
we
is
set a
here.
date, they'll be here. They're not going to
no,
miss it.
they may have a conflict, and he doesn't know, so why don't we set it,
627, Great Hall, 7 PM.
okay, and then if you all have a
If you
conflict,
vote
let
on
us
it,
know. All in favor?
Aye.
I'm opposed.
And we're going to get with
Yeah, that was part of the motion.
Right.
Amended.
Well, yeah.
So is the board looking to have a meeting with council prior to 7 o'clock,
Yes.
Yes.
6 o'clock, 5 o'clock?
Oh, no, anytime
No.
she can make it, anytime between now and the 27th.
Okay. Are
We'll just have to
are
make
board members
ourselves
going to
available.
provide questions or just come in and have her strike cold?
We'll do our best and do some homework.
I'm only trying to facilitate if I need to start reaching out to council to start setting up times.
Just send her these pending applications.
We're still in session. I really think it's only fair to write down specific questions for her, and then in the conversation, if you have follow-up questions, she's there to answer them.
Then she's prepared, and then we can use our time efficiently, and if we have additional questions,
Right.
it's so much easier if you talk to her in person than if you play the back and forth email
So if board
game.
members want to have questions to me by Friday, I can start the ball rolling with that, and we'll work on setting a time and additional questions can come up.
Will you all have your questions by Friday?
This Friday? I don't think so. What's the date today, the 6th?
The 6th.
We have time till the 27th, but first
Well, we
Friday-
also had the last 4 weeks, so I mean, I'd like to get her the questions as
It's-
quickly as
wait,
possible.
I can't do this
Wait, I
Friday.
had questions for the attorney, and I made it known, and I talked to Tavis, and I was told by you that we had to wait to ask him till later, so there was no
That was the
point sending them.
Thursday before the meeting. It was too late to get with, she has some, we have to get them to her so that she can answer them properly. So the sooner we can get them, maybe Friday's too
under-
early, maybe the Friday after.
We can't do it Friday. We
No,
just got this stuff.
turning in the Friday after this coming Friday, putting in your questions so that she can get the
The
answers.
17th,
17th?
Friday the 17th, thank you.
Well, if we're meeting, just a minute.
That gives her
If
over
we're
a week.
meeting on the
2 Mondays after the 17th.
She's got
17th, of course, let's see this. That gives her a work week to answer our questions. And it gives us 2 work weeks to get her our questions. Can we split the difference and say Wednesday, the 15th?
And we can meet with her, how did you say it, Tim? By Skype or whatever it is?
Electronically?
Electronically?
I guess we could.
I mean, I don't care, but long as it's just not in writing, that we can verbalize with her in some fashion.
It is more cost-effective for the town if Skype is used as opposed to paying for travel.
You got a nice fat budget for legal.
I don't have, well, that's a different discussion. There is no budget for legal right now in the ZBA line, but
Audrey,
I
Yes.
digress.
in addition to the questions that get submitted, is she going to be available to answer questions?
Yes, we're
that's
going
the
to arrange
point,
that
Because
prior to
there's-
the meeting.
No, there's some sort of contradictory information in different.
Right, there'll be
places with
follow-up questions to the answers that she
So-
gives.
So
Yeah.
it's not,
15th?
so it's not limited just to the written question. Out of that spawns more questions for which we can interface with
Right.
her electronically.
So would it be safe to say that the date to submit questions has been changed to Wednesday, the 15th at 4 PM?
I would like that.
I thought you said the 17th.
So this gives,
Well, they asked for an
the
earlier time.
this gives the same amount of time for us to submit questions as it gives her to answer the questions.
And this gives us a week and a half and gives her a week and a half. Seems fair.
We're still open to the public, right?
Okay.
So I'll see if we can go to 5 o'clock on the 27th with a Zoom or in person?
Wait, 27th is a meeting with them.
Right.
Correct. So you get questions to me by the 15th, they get submitted to council. Council then has until the 27th to answer and come with those questions, either electronically or in person, because you said you wanted to meet prior to the ZBA meeting with council.
Right.
If you also want to have council available at the meeting, that takes Zoom off the table.
And maybe we want to have counsel here at the hearings.
That's why I'm asking what the board would like, Suzanne.
I think that, Sarah, did you hear that? Would we?
No, it's too confusing.
I didn't think so.
Because I can't hear him clearly.
If questions are submitted by the board members to staff by 4 p.m. on June 15th,
Right, then I thought we were going to Skype with her prior to the meeting, meaning not that day, but sometime before the meeting.
that's the same clarity I'm trying to get from the board.
Okay.
Gotcha.
So you don't want to meet with her before the meeting? You want to meet with her before the day of the meeting? Is that what I'm hearing you
Yes.
say? Okay.
Yeah.
I will do my
So can you
best.
find out what her schedule is?
Yes. And remember, just for the public listening, it's not a secret meeting of the zoning board. It's considered a non-meeting when the ZBA members meet with council. So
Non-meeting, non-public, under the exemptions of 91A.
correct.
Okay.
I will let the board know as soon as I can what council schedule looks like between the 15th and the 27th.
Okay.
So was that motion to continue all of the agenda items to the, okay, just wanted to be clear on that.
I think we can, do you have anything else to say, Randy, before I close the public hearing?
Oh,
You're
no,
not closing the
continue
public
it.
hearing.
Oh, that's right, I'm continuing it.
We know
Still
what you,
open.
we know what you meant, but no, you've continued it, and so we'll be back in 3 weeks, and I may try myself to see if Laura will talk to me and see if we can maybe come up with a, I think this, she thinks this, and she might convince me of some things. I might be able to convince her some things if that works, but she may not chat with me.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, you got